Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees for Monday, August 26, 2019. Could we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Phyllis, roll call, please.
Mayor Clint Folsom.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mark Lasis.
Here.
Trustee Sandy Hemmerly.
Here.
Ken Lish.
Here.
Kevin Ryan.
Here.
Neil Shaw.
Here.
Loris Blazinski. Town Manager Matt Magley.
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry.
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Harden here.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda or other changes that board members would like to make at this time?
I'd like to
Ken?
pull item number 3F, the resolution approving an over-the-air reception device agreement with CenturyLink.
Okay, Ken, pull
And
3F.
I'd like to pull, let's see, item 3B2, the Open Space Advisory Committee minutes.
Okay, Sandy, 3B2.
And I'd like to pull 3B3, 3C, and did Ken pull F?
Yes. Okay, any other changes? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Lish, second by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis. All those in favor? Passes unanimous. All right, next is reports, questions, and issues. Who'd like to start?
I can start.
Kevin, go ahead.
I have nothing to report.
Okay, good. Kevin?
I also have nothing to report. I was not able to make CAPS last week, and I want to thank Neil for the last minute stand-in for CAPS.
Mark?
Good evening, everyone. Two things to report and then just one announcement. So I attended the CAPS-sponsored Meet the Artist event that was held at Grasso Park. Members of the board attended here. It was really a well-attended event. There was an opportunity to meet Dow Bloomberg, who was the artist who just installed the wonderful roundabout art that we have at Main Street and McCaslin. So I think that this was just one of those great events that we had here in the town of Superior. Everybody just came together. I was really proud of this. It's such a unique sculpture, and I just think, CAPS did a wonderful job, staff did a wonderful job, the artist did a wonderful job, and it's just one of those opportunities to just take a step back and really appreciate just what a wonderful community we live in. So just wanted to say thank you to everyone who was involved in that. Secondly, I wanted to just tell the board about an experience that we had with respect to the liquor license that we had for the event that we hosted on Friday night. So this was my first opportunity as a member of the public coming before the board to get a liquor license for a party that we held at Wildflower Park. One of the experiences, and staff was really helpful in terms of getting the insurance coverage that we needed for the event. One of the, I think, unintended consequences that came to light by going through this process was the type of liquor license that we needed for this event is essentially the same liquor license. So we basically had like a barbecue, it was like a family gathering. It's the same type of liquor license, a special event liquor license, as you would need to get if you were hosting Chili Fest. And in connection with that, you also needed to get insurance coverage for that event. So, which we did, and Matt helped out with putting me in touch with somebody who could provide that policy. But initially, the coverage that we had attempted to get would have cost something like $500 for the event. And it was the same type of coverage as if we were hosting Chili Fest. And obviously, these are events of just different scales. So I don't think that this is something that the board intended to cause. And if we want to kind of facilitate neighborhood gatherings and parks and liquor licenses, I think maybe we want to revisit maybe a code change in the future to make it a little more easy for individual residents who are trying to host an event that's going to have a liquor license. When I was speaking with my insurance agent, he was really surprised at kind of how onerous Superior's code is on this issue, and said that in most jurisdictions, like even Denver, for example, your homeowner's policy can cover an event like this. So, we might want to consider just revisiting the code, see if there's a process improvement, because I don't think we really are intending people to pay $500 for a barbecue in Wildflower Park. Lastly, I just wanted to give an update on Rocky Flats and a little overview of Rocky Flats for the public. So Rocky Flats, for those of you who don't know, I'm assuming most people do know, operated as a manufacturing facility that produced plutonium triggers for nuclear weapons for 4 decades between 1950 and 1990. And numerous environmental issues plagued the site, including fires that released plutonium waste that was burned and illegally dumped on the site. And following an investigation by the EPA, and with the assistance of numerous whistleblowers, the FBI raided the site in 1989, and a grand jury indicted the site's operators for various environmental crimes. A plea deal followed, as did a monumental cleanup. Well, in 1994, the Department of Energy study estimated that the cleanup would cost $36 billion and would take 60 years. Well, instead, the cleanup was completed in 10 years at the cost of only $7 billion. So the question is, did they get it all? Well, Fish and Wildlife admitted in 2003 that they did not. Some plutonium remains on site. We don't know how much, and we don't know how widespread it is, but we know it is there. And for years, members of the public, advocacy groups, and elected officials have asked for more tests before any trails, roads, or access to the public would be granted. Well, we're finally starting to see the results of some of these tests, the first in almost 15 years, and they are not good. On August 20th, CDPHE put out a letter, and a copy of which is available on my Twitter account, @MarkLaces, where they announced that the Jefferson Parkway Highway Authority alerted CDPHE about a soil sample that they collected that came back at 264 picocuries per gram of plutonium, which is over 5 times the acceptable threshold level for the cleanup standard. As a member here on the Board of Trustees, I believe it is our highest responsibility to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens. And in my opinion, there's no risk worth the cost of opening up these lands to the public. Nevertheless, on September 10th, the Broomfield City Council will be considering whether to make an additional $2.5 million funding commitment for the Jefferson Parkway. And I really just can't understand why any elected officials would rush in such a circumstance. So if you are opposed to the Jefferson Parkway, I would suggest you email the Broomfield City Council at council@broomfieldcitycouncil.org. I'd also encourage you to attend the September 10th Broomfield City Council meeting and speak during public comment in opposition to the Jefferson Parkway. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Neil?
Thanks. On October 21st, I attended the monthly ProStack meeting, and I have a couple of highlights quickly. Resident Jay Byther presented his proposed Eagle Scout project to ProStack for putting up 9 trail markers to possibly note the distance that you're on a trail and directions to another trail. ProStack was generally receptive to the proposal, and Mr. Byther is going to go back and work with staff on a specific format proposal. It turns out we actually don't have a consistent trail marker within the town, so this is going to be part of his project, is to define some, proposed trail markers that can be used, and ProStack will look at those at some subsequent date. He has to complete his Eagle Scout project before he turns 18. I think we have about 9 months before that happens. On August 22nd, as Trustee Ryan noted, I attended a CAPS meeting since he couldn't attend. The committee held a conference call with Happy City for an update on the placemaking master plan. In light of that conversation, CAPS is going to be in here to talk, going to give us an overview. And there is a staff memo that accompanies that, with respect to additional funds, but there's a little bit of we got to correct a couple things. Item 2FII, the numbers are slightly different than what CAPS is looking for. The first number should be $2250 for CAPS training on community engagement collection during the Chili Fest week. And the other is, the second number is inclusive of the first. The second number should be $7250. The extra $5,000 is to have a rep from Happy City attend the line dancing event in September for community outreach. Now, the memo makes it look like these are binary cost items. The interesting thing here, at least part of my update, is CAPS had a real tough time trying to align on which item they want the board to support, whether it's the 2250 or the 7250. I was actually very impressed at their desire to limit the amount of spending, since we've already committed to $50,000 for the placemaking effort, and this is an incremental $5,000 attached to that as well, so it's 10%. I'm generally in support of it, because one of the things that happened in terms of the community outreach that was supposed to happen at the main event in July is, because of the lightning storm, we weren't able to get all the community engagement that we wanted. So this is really to dovetail and to make up for what we weren't able to do in July. So, obviously CAPS will be here to give us an update, and that is the extent of my updates.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Sandy?
Good evening, everyone. I also attended the unofficial opening or official opening of our new beautiful artwork in the roundabout. And one of the things that really touched me that evening was just the conversation that Dow had with the community about his artwork. And Matt, I would really like to challenge you, your staff, or CAPS to try and capture some of the comments that he made that night. There were things that he talked about the artwork that just made it a lot more personal to me to hear. For example, the gold that he used on the gold figure, he kept trying to find the gold and he couldn't come up with the right thing, and he ended up using like 1965 GM auto gold on there. To me, that was just a fascinating piece of information. The other thing that he said at the end of the night that to me said something very special about the town of Superior. He said, he's in the business of creating artwork for communities, but we're one of the few communities that ever treated him as special as we did that evening and made him feel like he had done something really special for our town, that often an installation would occur. He comes in, he leaves, and there's no big deal. So he really appreciated the special reception that CAPS and the community had given him. And he didn't just come in and put art in our town. He's really left a little bit of himself with us. And we're very lucky to have his contribution to our town. So if we could get him to just do a write-up even on some of the comments, he spoke from the heart, but it was really, really quite touching what he said. And I think it'd be great if we could capture that and just put something out on our website that talks a little bit about the artwork and the artist. I attended the OSAC meeting on August 14th. As I think you all know, I've pulled the report from OSAC because we want to discuss one of their recommendations during public comment or after public comment. But one of the other things that I also wanted to comment on, I was very concerned that night by the fact that OSAC had been given the Toll Brothers proposal to review less than 36 hours before our meeting. I have not personally looked at that because I'm not allowed to yet. I left the room while they were discussing it at the advice of our attorney and was happy to do so. But what really disturbed me is that's a huge proposal, and yet our advisory committee was given 36 hours to sit down and comment on that with literally no guidance. Now, I believe part of the problem may be that we have a transition with staff, and had Patrick Hammer still been here, he might have been able to help them, but that's a huge proposal with 300 houses. And I really think we need to think through the process by which we are asking our advisory committees, particularly OSAC and PROSTAC, and to a point also CAPS, because they're looking at where are the opportunities for parks and trails and open space and public art. And 36 hours is simply not enough time. As a result, OSAC did go and attend the Planning Commission meeting. I think they did their best, but I'm not sure we had prepared them as well as we could to participate in the process. So I would really like to ask that we think hard about the pressure we're putting on our advisory committees and really give them a little more structure on how they can comment and be helpful in the process as opposed to struggling. The last thing I want to report on, I attended DRCOG on August 21st, and I'm happy to report that the TIP sub-regional recommendations were approved, so we're going to get our $1 million for the extension of the DRCOG bike trail.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Andy. Good evening, everyone. Just one announcement about an upcoming event. Saturday, September 7th, is Chili Fest, 2 to 6 p.m. Chili Fest is our Chili and Beer Fest, is our biggest event in Superior of the year, and look forward to seeing people out there. And the day starts with an 8 a.m. 5K run put on by our Superior Chamber of Commerce. So look forward to seeing everybody at Chili Fest. And that is it for my announcements. Matt?
Thank you. Just some clarification from the board, confirmation. When the board was deciding meeting dates, right after this board took seat, November meeting was moved to November 18th, Monday, because November 11th is Veterans Day. Just want to make sure. And then the second meeting in November was canceled. So that's the month that we'll be reviewing the Morgan Ranch FDPs. I just wanted to confirm that that's still the way this board I had a question from someone, I forget who, about those dates. So I just wanted to confirm that that still is the board's wishes in November.
Is your recommendation that we have that meeting, just a single meeting for that FDP, or that it's going to require more than one meeting?
I have in my schedule 2 meetings at least for that FDP. So we have 1 meeting in December as well.
Would it make sense to do them both in November just for continuity and not having a month in between an FDP? I guess it depends on everybody's schedules and availability, but.
Because the second meeting in November is the week of Thanksgiving, and that was the reason we decided, or the board decided not to.
We could do a special meeting on the 12th, the day after Veterans Day, and then keep the meeting on the 18th, if people are available.
I can't commit to the 12th at this point without checking. I mean, we could do a poll or
yeah.
whatever, but
Right, I can send one out.
I would need time to look at a calendar and other stuff.
Sure.
But maybe.
Can you include prior weeks as well, so such as November 4th in
Yeah.
the doodle poll?
Yeah, I will. Okay, I'll send that out.
I think that would be advantageous just for the,
Okay.
just to keep it together. A lot can change in a month, and
Right.
I just don't think it's good practice to have a split a month in between a meeting like that,
Okay.
or a topic like that.
Well, especially if we only have 1 meeting in December and this happens to take 3 meetings. We don't want this to span.
That's a
3
very
months.
good point, too. That's a very good point.
I will send that out. The last thing is, when the board had dinner with the Historical Commission, there was, I think, general consensus to allow members to call into meetings. I have that question now from other committees, so I wanted to see if the board was okay with other committees doing that as well, or you want to just leave it at the Historical Commission.
And my suggestion is if we allow this, we need to have a policy to make it consistent. I know these are only advisory committees, but this thing tends to bleed out into other
Yes.
things. So my recommendation is we have a policy as to when we allow it, how we allow it, what it,
Okay.
and I have done this for other clients. So if we need to, I have a policy that you can look at.
So we had a pretty lengthy discussion during a retreat about this, and I mean, some of us were okay with telephonic participation, and others were strongly opposed to it. So I think that this is probably not something that we could just change right here on the dais right now.
Okay.
Matt, what might be helpful is if you could summarize the requests in the next digest, and if need be, if there's great enough demand, maybe we circle back at the next retreat to discuss it. If there's enough.
Okay. I will put that information in there.
I would agree. And maybe also if we could have maybe summarize what the discussion was at the last retreat, because you're right, there was a lot of discussion there, and I don't think I think we need to remember what was said and not have the same discussion again 6 months later. So
Yeah.
okay, we're going to do public comment just in a moment. Okay. Yeah, hold off for just a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
That was it for me.
Okay. Kendra,
I don't have anything other than the presentation I'll do later.
thanks. Phyllis. Okay. All right, now we'll do public comment on consent agenda, presentations, and non-agenda items. Just for clarification, we do have several presentations tonight, and just for clarification, we typically do not do public comment during or after the presentation segment. So if you'd like to comment on something in the presentation segment, now is the opportunity to do that. So we're now open for public comment. Daryl, thank you for waiting.
Daryl McCool, 312 West Coal Creek. So the request from CAPS was for calling in was we were trying to figure out a way to have a meeting, not a meeting, it was a training session with Happy City. And I had suggested that we meet here and allow people to call in. It wasn't an actual meeting that we wanted to have. It was a training which was totally separate. And we were just trying to figure out a way to accommodate people that were volunteering their time and trying to, learn what we're trying to be trained on by Happy City. So it wasn't that, at least for CAPS, that we were trying to have people call into our meetings. We would prefer everybody to be there, but we'd like to be as flexible as possible for something that is sort of outside the norm, which was this training session. So just some clarification from CAPS perspective.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay. Additional public comment? Ryan.
Good evening, Town Board. Ryan Welch. I'm the chair of OSAC. OSAC has had quite a few things in our work plan that have kind of come to closure, so I figured I'd just come up and give you an update. We have a lot of recommendations in our minutes from last time, but I figured I'd just give you the brief synopsis. As Trustee Hammerly said, one of the big ones was making a recommendation on the Toll Brothers property. We did our best. We got a little bit of heat from the Planning Commission because we didn't quite understand some of the PD requirements in the property. So that was kind of the place where we felt we took a hit. But we got our recommendations out. We still think well, I actually won't go into the details because I don't think you guys have seen the plan yet. So I'll leave it at that, but we did get in front of the Planning Commission. We also, on the other side though, for the park at Rock Creek, which is the Zaharias development, because of the Hodgson Harris Reservoir, we've had our eyes on this for a long time. We've got our recommendations set and ready for when that does come in front of the Planning Commission. So we have that ready, and we've made the recommendation, but it's ready to go. The third one we made was about asking you to accept the annual trails plan that we have with ProStack. That's done. You won't see anything all that new in that plan. The interesting thing there is we know there isn't funding for that until Wildflower Park is paid back. At least there may not be. I shouldn't say there won't be, but there probably won't, especially also since this DRCOG trail, we're getting funding. That makes sense to fund ahead of any of the other trails that we have in our plan, but that is coming forward, and that should be made public on our website after it's approved. The final one was about this bird box request that Trustee Hammerly pulled for this reason. We're going to ask for $10,000 to come out of the open space fund to fund 2 bird boxes that will have webcams, and then up to 8 other boxes that will just be for nesting encouragement throughout the town. When we first talked about it, we thought we could do it for $5,000. The budget went up because some of the aesthetics of the poles. There was some debate about, how we could get this done, but we say up to 10 because we don't know exactly what the price will be. So I don't know if I'll be able to stay tonight until that agenda item gets opened up, but I will do my best. But we're really excited about this opportunity to bring webcams to our to the people that are loving watching all the bird activity in our town. Outside of the recommendations, the other thing I wanted to let you know is that the Shan Shan property, the construction on that will start when around the time the Colton reconstruction is done, so we'll start to see a trailhead go in this fall, and that is for the initial basic trailhead. The other thing that we've done from board direction is we've come up with a small, medium, and large ask out of potentially next year's budget or the open space fund to enhance that trailhead. So we're working on how we can get in front of that in terms of either giving you a presentation or the budget process, maybe with a board or a presentation on all of our ideas around the trailhead. Finally, the open space summary report and recommendations is a report that has a list of all the available open space. Probably one of the biggest things we do. We finished that ranking. We weren't able to get a recommendation done last meeting, but that'll come forward in the next month. That'll have the updated rankings. When there's only 6 or 7 properties and things are getting developed, it actually changes quite a bit. With Anderson, Rogers Farm, and Ridge properties all pretty much coming off the list. And with that, those were the updates I wanted to give you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Ryan?
Yeah.
First off, thanks for that presentation. That was very informative. 2 things. I guess I'll just apologize for the board for giving OSAC such short time to review the Toll Brothers application. And I wouldn't worry about catching any heat from the Planning Commission. Your recommendations from the committee level are geared towards open space ramifications of the application. So anything that you are going to be recommending to us, we'll consider it appropriately in line with the mission of OSAC. So
thank you for that.
I appreciate the fact that you dropped everything to weigh in on the application. The other thing I just wanted to ask about, I believe when we had dinner with OSAC, one of the items that was discussed was working with ProStack to develop recommendations on the Town 15 property. Has there been any progress made on that?
So, yes, and it's a long story. We started working with them. We had a joint meeting. Where we ended was that we felt that we didn't want to make a ton of recommendations for that property for specific features without having the PROS master plan updated. We felt like we were picking and choosing our maybe pet projects without actually having a good analysis done on what really was missing to complete Superior. So the first thing we said was, well, we'd like the town to, or we're going to, we've asked the town to fund that for next year to help move that forward. We submitted a position paper right after that last application that started this. We had wanted to work with ProStack to enhance that. You'll see that they've made their own recommendation on how to protect the land. So now you've got 2. And I think the challenge between OSAC and ProStack is how to improve our communication so that we can get that down to just one kind of position or vision paper. So that's where we're at right now.
Thanks.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. Additional public comment?
I do have one additional
sure.
question for Ryan.
Yeah.
So, since you may not be here when we actually do discuss the minutes, the Raptor Nest Box Initiative, my understanding from reading the minutes is that the idea is that the Colorado Avian Research and Rehabilitation Institute will mostly be running the project and will be responsible for actually constructing everything, and we're basically just paying them to be able to do it?
Correct. I mean, we're paying for the materials and their time. But based on, we have a couple members that are pretty active in our bird community in town, and so they'll be consulting along with town staff. One of the biggest things was, where do you put a Raptor camera that is protected from vandalism, if you will? Someone might think it's funny to get in there and mess with a camera. So that's why we wanted to put it on town building that's protected. So part of that was figuring out the right areas that made sense. But yes, it'll be materials and time. And the materials are actually not that much, except for those poles that we talked about. Yeah. We talked about doing simple telephone poles, but some people were concerned that putting those maybe close to a resident's home may not look the best, and we might want to improve the aesthetics of such boxes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Additional public comment? Any additional public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to presentations, and we've got 4 different presentations tonight. First up, we have our economic development update. Welcome, Adam.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Is there a way that I can access that on here? Thank you, Barton. So I'd like to introduce a couple of my colleagues that came out here with me this evening who are on our team. Matthew Godfrey, the founder of our firm, as well as Kelby Boschert, our COO. And I'd also like to kind of just go through this at a high level. I know that you have a lot of agenda items tonight. I can take as long or as little as you like in going through it. I know the information that I sent was very extensive in terms of 80 pages of documentation, but at a very high level, what I'd like to do is just maybe go through the format and the scope of work elements by task and talk a little bit about the elements that we're working on. And at a high level, go through the workforce and cluster industry analysis that was performed, the methodology we used to identify target companies, our efforts in outreach, and then go from there. But please feel free to pose any questions throughout the presentation and this update report as you'd like. So each month what we'll do is we'll use this format and we'll just add to it as we are executing on the scope of work elements, so you can see which elements we've worked on in prior months and on the current month. And I can't really see that well, but so in July we continued outreach to potential targets in the recreation and entertainment areas of focus, and we discussed having one in particular that expressed a high level of interest in the marketplace. We introduced them to Brixmor, and they evaluated that opportunity internally, and they decided they're going to continue marketing the property and working with Party City on marketing that property, as they still have some time left on that existing lease to see if any other opportunities present themselves before making a determination on that. But that is a use that is really interested in this market. So whether it's here or possibly another opportunity within the town that we could possibly pursue with them. But we're continually finding, new businesses and entrance into this particular area. And each month we're finding a few more that we're reaching out to and following up on other ones as well. So any questions on this particular scope of work element? Okay. On the hotel recruitment, we've continued to reach out to potential developers on both the Resolute and the downtown Superior site, and in informing them of the opportunities with those site locations and following up on other hoteliers and flags that we've had previous discussions with. And based on some of the feedback that we've got last time we were here, the town would like us to focus on the upper upscale, more boutique end of the market to see what level of interest is there. And we're continuing to conduct that outreach in the marketplace. Any questions on the scope of work?
Yeah, Adam, just a question when it comes to the Resolute property. As you think about what's there today in the future Resolute or Superior Shores on the Superior side of the line, but all the upcoming Broomfield development, both, all the condos and apartments around the Walmart and to the west, plus the future redevelopment of the Flatirons Marketplace to add in more residential. Is there a pivot here for that space, away from a hotel to something else? Boutique grocery store, I don't know, but is there something else that could feed, take the word feed out, is there something else that could support, the number of people that are going to be living in that area pretty soon?
Well, if we just look at maybe the high level of that corridor, something at the Resolute site should be done to try and activate and draw people in further to the corridor and hopefully into Superior and further down Colton Road. So, we've had this discussion with a couple of other developers about this particular site and whether there should be a pivot. When you talk to a retail developer, what they want to see there, or a retail owner, is they want to see housetops. And so they'd like to see all of that rezoned residential. In terms of the tax base of the community, that obviously has an impact, but also recognize that the Flatiron Mall has some constraints in terms of soil conditions and construction costs there. And they actually had pulled a hotel from their application for development. I'm not sure if it was because of the soil conditions, but it should be noted that, there's one of the flags that we met with had a project that was looking at going there, and that's been pulled from that application. I think it's a really great site for a hotel. We haven't pursued other commercial uses there. I know that the developers or the owners of the site have a very wide net, and they've entertained other types of uses there. But I think it really just comes down to what the town wants to see there. Because I know that there is an incentive provided specifically for that use. And if there is a different direction the town would like to go, I think the market can support other uses there.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions on the scope work element? Okay. On the office and service firm recruitment, we completed our workforce, clustering workforce analysis and developed marketing collateral. And that's really the bulk of this update report, is that report as well as the marketing collateral. And so it's included in the packet. I can explain the methodology at a high level of what we did. We were looking for some really useful data just in terms of who are the major employers in this area and what industry clusters they are. And businesses are classified by what's called a North America Industry Classification System, or an NAICS code. And when you have those clustering effects, it becomes more attractive for another business within that industry to locate within that workforce shed, because they have similarities in terms of skills and the labor workforce. And we weren't able to find some really useful data. At a very high level, we could find information, but the methodology that we used was we actually utilized our real estate subscription that allows us to identify who the tenants are in all the office buildings along the US 36 corridor. So we actually pulled all those tenants and we classified them into those NAICS codes. So we did a lot of research and diligence in that area, and then we aggregated up the number of employees and the number of firms by those NAICS codes and to identify what clusters exist within the corridor. And then based on that, we also have another subscription to another service provider called Gazelle, and they keep track of businesses by NAICS code that are poised for growth, and they have some artificial intelligence that identifies who those companies might be. And so we plugged in those NAICS codes into that program, that platform, and identified a bunch of targets. And in the appendix of the report, you'll see we have hundreds of businesses in those NAICS codes that have been identified for growth. And so the next step was to begin conducting outreach. And I think what would be helpful, at least from our perspective, would be if you could look at the marketing collateral that we've put together and highlighting, one of the big characteristics that really sets Superior apart is you have tremendous human capital. And you have really great universities that are graduating students from these programs that then help feed these clusters. And that's going to be really attractive to employers. The other facet is that you have a lot of Superior residents who are working in these industry clusters who are commuting out of the community. And should an employer locate in Superior, they can take advantage of the fact that they've got great proximity to the workforce and a more convenient location. So the marketing brochure is a couple pages. If you could maybe take some time, provide us with some feedback, anything that you think should be included that isn't, or things that are included that you'd like to see changed or altered, please do let us know. We'd love to receive feedback on that. And that's included in the packet. So let's see. All right, so any questions on the scope of work element? Okay. So the next one is food and beverage recruitment. And we've identified a couple of conferences that are happening in April of next year in this particular area. And I think the question for the town is this an area of focus that you would like to see the town actively involved in trying to position itself to recruit in businesses, to help entrepreneurs penetrate the market and grow and receive support? We've started compiling a database. We've reached out to a lot of business associations in this space to get lists of membership. And so we have that. We've got a couple hundred businesses that we can begin reaching out to in each of these different categories: cideries, urban wineries, distilleries, tap houses, breweries, those types of things. And I guess one of the questions that I have for the town is, to what extent would you like us to pursue this? And is this a potential use for the former Land Rover building?
When you say this, you're talking about the food and beverage?
A food and beverage operator, yeah, someone that has an operation either starting or established.
I'll start. My answer is yes. I think this is a worthy use of your time and something we should pursue. I think bringing in some type of small niche beverage oriented business would be value added to this community and gives residents an additional option for how to spend their time and tax dollars for that matter. And I think it could also be a draw that I think purposefully we're not seeing brewery up there because it's a saturated market, but everything else up there that's still unique. So it could be a regional draw as well. So I'm in favor of following up on this area.
I think what we heard from Brixmor today was that the good work that you're doing and the Northwest Sub-Area planning work that we're doing, well, is appreciated. Was not maybe the best use of our money, that because they view that a lot as their job. So I think when I think about the properties within Brixmor and the vacancies and the empty storefronts, and there's a lot of them, I'm glad you're out there helping, and we'll continue to be a partner for Brixmor, but that's their primary job. When I think about downtown Superior, I'm glad you're out there helping, and we'll continue to be a partner to Ranch Capital, but that's their primary job. When I think about Land Rover and that building formerly known as the Land Rover building, there's nobody out there looking out for us. That's our job. That's our primary job. So 100%, really appreciative of the effort. I think looking at the good work that Happy City did, we could spend the next 3 hours giving you our ideas, which would not be the best use of probably your time or the community's time. So I would just steer you towards the good work that Happy City did in some of those community meetings. I think that's excellent. And the work that you've done, I really appreciate the kind of that PowerPoint that's out there, that deck. I do have a few comments, so I'll sketch something out tonight and shoot it over to Matt to send to you.
Okay.
I'm really thankful for your work and welcome to your team. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Others?
Yeah, I feel similarly that any and all good ideas related to the former Land Rover building, which now is property of the town of Superior, should be explored. So in connection with our RFQ that's going out to architectural firms, I want us to have the conversations now with any and all potential partners, whether they are food and beverage or other. I think we should be having all of those conversations. But I think, food and beverage should be some part of it.
Neil or Sandy, anything? Okay. I'm supportive of looking at it further. I would caution that we've got across the street, we've got food and beverage locations that some have done well over time and some that have turned over a lot and really struggled. And I would caution us to get into a situation where looks like we're trying to compete with them or put them out of business or somehow provide an unfair advantage because this is town-owned and that's all privately owned and not getting any kind of subsidies. I want us to approach this very carefully, and I think done well, it could complement the whole area because people can't eat the same place every day, and you need variety, and more variety is generally a good thing. But the distinct difference is this is a town-owned property that is adjacent to privately owned property that is not getting any kind of breaks. So that's my comment.
Okay. I think that's very helpful, and we did have discussion with the property owners across the street in terms of providing them with leads in this space as well. And so to the extent that we can, I mean, they've got, I think, 2 available units right now. One is 2,500 square feet. That seems to be a good fit for this. We could certainly pass those along to them in priority and allow them to take a look at it first. Okay. Any questions or comments on this scope of work element? Okay. Okay. On the Colton Road, we've had some discussions with Happy City on the work that they've been doing, trying to coordinate with them and ensuring that we don't have duplication of efforts. But I think the overarching feedback that we've been getting just regarding this area is that it's really viewed as the center of the community and that people would really like to see events and activities happening here. And so we've begun to have those kind of conversations with the property owner about what types of activities they like to see there. And what we'd like to do this next month is to have kind of an outreach to all because there's 4 or 5 different property owners at that center. Just to try and start engaging them in discussions about what can be done collectively at that center to try and activate it, to try and create, have more creativity there, other types of events, and also just reinvesting in the center. If that was something that if one person does it and somebody else, one owner does it, another owner doesn't, there's kind of a negative incentive there. So if we can try and create some level of agreement in terms of the future of that center, I think it would be really helpful. And in addition, we were also thinking of perhaps having some type of an incubator or accelerator or something that can help the entrepreneurial ecosystem within the town. If there's an entrepreneur that has a business looking to start up, to look at forming at least relationships with existing incubators and accelerators in Boulder County rather than trying to recreate the wheel. But seeing if they might have interest in having some type of satellite location along Colton Road. I think the economics are such that it's really the only place, I think, for a startup business to find something that is affordable, that they could use as a stepping stone to penetrate the market. So that's what we're looking at accomplishing here within the next month or so. Any questions or comments on that scope work element? Existing businesses. So the chamber had their board retreat last Friday, and I was able to visit with them and talk about some of the things that I'm working on and the things that the chamber's working on and figuring out ways in which we can work together to help local businesses. They have a very active chamber board, and we just had a really great discussion about some of the needs and opportunities within the town as well. And we'd like to utilize the chamber and have roundtable discussions with some of their members to talk about, maybe some of the things that could be done within some of the built environment areas that we've just discussed to help those local businesses. So we'll continue, and we're continuing to conduct interviews. We conduct a couple of interviews every week with businesses, and we'll continue to do that. And look to hold roundtable discussions probably sometime in September.
Adam, just a quick question, because I took what you have on this slide and then one on table 12 on slide 33, and it's the office locations, the companies that are here. And in my head, there's a bit of disconnect between the chamber and the office residents. I don't know that the chamber has those, those businesses aren't members of the chamber generally. And you have a small takeaway on the bottom of that table of, they should be a top priority for retention. What should we be doing to retain those businesses? Like, how are we communicating with them?
Yeah,
The fact that it was as hard as it was for you to figure out who they all were, tell them we've got a blind spot for the office space that we have and who's using it.
We absolutely do. And that's a great observation. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the elements that we have included in our scope of work for next month, is to try and reach out to these office users. Because as we've gone through the community, we've asked who else should we be talking to. Nobody mentioned any of these businesses. It's always been retail focused, right? And that makes sense because the residents of the community are consumers for the most part. So, but yeah, we've already talked with one of these businesses already who also owns the property over there. But those other ones, we certainly will reach out to whoever it is that's over that particular division, have discussions with them.
Great.
On what their needs might be and what opportunities might exist.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And we've also provided the C-Source market advisory reports and also the retail analysis as well, where we've gone through and we've identified, the vacancy and also some of the consumer spending patterns within the community. We, in the previous work session, when the question was asked about occupancy and vacancy, we have all that information in here. We have it at the store level, at the unit level. Our numbers are a little different just because of the way that they account for the Party City space. But we also have it broken down by large box, or I'd say stores that are over 20,000 square feet, stores that are greater than 5,000 but less than 20,000, and then the stores less than 5,000. And so, and we keep track of that from month to month. So I think that's helpful information. And the C-Source report, we've also been able to procure geolocation data. This was in your July packet. It includes some information regarding the Colton Road corridor, and we compared two of those properties there, and we looked at just the behavior of devices that were recorded in that area. And we're looking at adding that to our report so you can see just on a monthly basis what those trends look like, as well as adding in Superior Marketplace and Downtown Superior in that analysis as well. So I think that would be really helpful just to see not only consumer spending, but also what is the actual consumer behavior in terms of visitation. So any questions on those two elements or comments? Okay.
Are you going to look at the C-Source? Is that next? I did have a question on one of the C-Source pages. So page 7. Yeah, page 7 of C-Source. Back a few more.
Can't see that page number over there.
That's 10. 8. That's it. Yeah, demographic profiles. Help me understand this. What this is saying is this the people spending money in Superior from these various zip codes? Is that what
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, consumer spending share. So that makes sense that majority of them are 80027. I'm not following how a California zip code can be in there. Is that just someone that happens to have their MasterCard bill going to California that bought a lot of something in Superior? Is that what's going on there?
It could be. It could also be trends that there's a lot of visitation from that zip code in the US 36 corridor. Okay. They're stopping in Superior to purchase goods. So we know that in Boulder there's a lot of visitation, and perhaps that there might be some overflow that's occurring here as well.
Okay.
And so these are the top 20, but as you start looking out of the top 20 at percentages that are much less than this, you start seeing a much wider geographic representation.
Sure.
So you are getting visitation, and if you aggregate all that up, it might be a couple percentages of the total consumer spending within the community. But like you were saying and observing, a lot of it is just coming from the surrounding communities that you have.
And does this total list, this is the top 20, but does the total list add to 100?
No, because there are some zip codes that are redacted that we don't have access to because the number of transactions is so small that if you were really trying to figure out who was visiting, there may be not a chance that you could actually do that. So I think it gets within a significant amount, more than, I'd say, 85% of the total spending.
Okay. Mike.
So a couple things. First, I mean, I think there's so much data in the report, and I don't have time to dig through all of it. I think it's great, but I mean, I think is just when you look at data like this, there's a bullet point or two that's extracting. And I don't know exactly what that bullet point or two is, but just want to make sure that we're not putting that in front of somebody. And maybe the bullet point is, we, unlike other municipalities within Boulder County, we're actually getting visitation from outside of Boulder County, unlike Lafayette, who gets, maybe no visitation from outside. We get twice as much visitation, meaning we're more of a destination. Maybe some bullet point like that is used as a piece of marketing. Having said that, can we just can we just roll through the 5 or 6 slides you have created to kind of present the town? And let's just spend a couple minutes talking about that. There's some, if there's not, while we have you. And then I also want to just make sure, what can we do to help you, right? I mean, I think sent you a note today. Hopefully other people are sending notes. People I'm sitting next to on airplanes, people I'm running into in conferences, people are, everybody that's experienced this town, whether or not they live here or they visit here, is in awe. The data is not going to represent what visitors to this town represent. We all need to help you get the word out because we do have a business development opportunity, which is why we hired you. So I want to do 2 things. Number 1, let's just walk us through the 5 or 6 slides that you created. And number 2, for our benefit, for the community's benefit, for the staff's benefit, let us know what we could do to help you. What are some of those messages that are resonating as you're out talking to, the random entrepreneur in St. Louis who happen to have a cousin in Superior, so maybe they're looking at investing here. What can we do? What's resonating and what can we do to help?
Okay, great. So I hope you like this picture. I think it's a beautiful picture. But
I'm curious about the pictures because there are some I like and some I don't. So
all right, that's the exact type of feedback we'd like. Yeah. So anything that we can do to demonstrate the value and just the quality of life that Superior has. And this is specific for the NAICS code that starts with 54, professional, scientific, and technical service industries. So that's the primary cluster that you have on the US 36 corridor. So I wanted to communicate how conveniently located the community is, not only, to major job centers in Boulder and Denver, also to the international airport, and some of the quality of life that is surrounding the community. So that's kind of the purpose of the slide, is just to show the proximity of Superior.
I think we could get a better visual there, just to demonstrate how the proximity to Denver, to the airport, to Rocky Mountain National Park, to ski resorts, right? This just looks like, this, no disrespect to anybody in the audience from Kansas, but this looks like something that could be from Kansas or Nebraska if you're looking about this.
Okay.
So just something that
Pops
highlights.
and shows that. Okay.
Yeah, zoomed out a
Right.
bit. I mean, because, there's a lot more that could be highlighted visually.
Oh, zoom out.
Yeah, I would say zoom out because the shape of it doesn't really matter. I mean, it is a point on a map, but you're trying to demonstrate proximity or proximity within all of these cool things.
Right.
This just shows the
Boulder.
proximity to the Wow's Children's Museum over in Lafayette.
Yeah. Which is cool.
Which is a great draw.
No disrespect. Okay.
All right, we'll make that change. Thank you. Okay, and then this is taking the workforce shed and showing what the population is within the different radius, so 5, 10, 20 miles.
And this is what people really care. This is, as I've learned up here doing my job, this is what resonates, right? This is what, for the person that's not going to visit the town and they're looking to figure out where to invest, they're just looking, you know, I don't have 100,000 people within 5 square miles. I'm not even thinking about it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you have access to 1.7 million people in 20 miles.
So this is a critical, this is, the aesthetics here don't matter. This is, you know, the data of 5, 10, 20 for how many people live there and what their income is. That's what we need this, okay?
Okay.
Is that better than it? So, I mean, that sounds cool to me. 76% of the town residents have bachelor's or graduate. That's impressive to me. Is that better or worse? Does that indicate, you know, what's my so what on this?
Yeah, it means you have a higher percentage. So that's what we're trying to show over here with the comparison to Boulder and Colorado, is that you have a higher percentage of your population that has a graduate degree than the rest of Boulder County, than the rest of Colorado.
Is there value having another bar of a national average or something that, I mean, we're talking to national firms, so what makes this even more special? So I assume that Boulder County is going to pop compared nationally, and then we're popping even above Boulder County, so that just builds that a bit more. So maybe a fourth bar in this graph as well.
Okay, we can add that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind you talking, the large employer that Broomfield now has is the Partners Group. I'd love for you to just spend some time with them. What brought them from Switzerland to Broomfield, right? Why they make Broomfield, Colorado, of all places, their U.S. headquarters, right?
Okay.
Let's go spend some time with them and what wowed them. And that's it's a great
case study, right?
It's a good for Broomfield for getting them, and I'm glad for the region for having those guys going to get paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
Hopefully they do well and spend their money in Superior and the county. But yeah, if you need help with an introduction to anybody over there, let Matt or us know, and we should be able to connect you with somebody there.
Okay, that's great. Okay, next slide. So we're just trying to demonstrate the momentum that exists within some of these industries, the 5-year growth pattern in IT software, beverage production, some of these other categories, and just the employment concentration. You know, how many companies are in this particular industry is just astonishing, over 5,000.
This slide, to me, the hand and the keyboard is a little bit overpowering. I mean, that's kind of what, that's all I'm drawn to when I look at this kind of from a distance. I mean, you've got really good information there, but I think the imaging could be
improved somehow.
Or that reduced and the other increased.
Highlighted.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on this slide? Okay.
Is there anything, I mean, I recognize that a lot of this, we're not just attracting the restaurateurs, the retail shops, we're also looking, this is a generic slide for companies as well. So it's a tech hub. Is there any value to you to talk about how many of us work from home? And I think Superior, I'm going to speculate, there's no data on this, but I would bet that there are more people in Superior that work from home than there are in other communities. It just feels that way.
It does,
So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that important is that an advantage or a disadvantage from your perspective?
I think it may be an advantage if we were looking at perhaps co-working space and trying to recruit in a co-working operator, because there are some work-at-home professionals who would prefer to have a co-working desk. But in terms of trying to recruit in, say, a corporate tenant, we're trying to fill office space.
Right.
And so I think there has to be probably a different presentation if we were trying to promote co-working space where we could have that type of data. And I don't know how we would gather that data.
So the message here is that
It's for office space, yeah.
This message is, it's a tech hub, a lot of expertise here for you to set up, and nobody wants to commute anymore, so they'll commute to, since, why not set up an office in a veteran community where there's a short, okay,
Yeah.
all right, I get that message.
And I don't know how we can get data of who's working from home other than sending out a survey. I mean, we could certainly do that to try and gather some information.
Let's just
but
think about it, let's just
Yeah.
put a little pin in it and think about it. It's
Okay.
fine.
So we're just trying to highlight some of the major companies in the area.
Yeah, let's go with, let's pull some, I think in the region,
Yeah.
now maybe not Boulder County, and that way we can include, I mean, I'm sure, I'll mention the Partners Group, another shout out, right? I mean, I think they hired 150 people in the last 6 months, it's tremendous. So, I mean, they're gonna be, I know everybody, I know somebody that works at all those companies except Seagate, right? I don't even know, and so, I think going kind of with a more regional lens there would be great.
And I think a piece that we're missing that we do have in the region is laboratories. We have NCAR, we have UCAR,
Right.
we have NOAA, we have NIST. We have a very academic, scientific-based region, and that's absolutely something that is a competitive advantage for this area that I think we can tout a bit more.
Okay. So maybe we could add that to the slide as well.
I was going through the slides trying to figure out the best spot for it. Sorry, I was going through the slides trying to find the best spot for it, and I feel like it's probably this slide. If you're going through it and you think there's a better spot for it, I'm open for it, but that in good company piece where you're actually highlighting what's in the region, that kind of feels like the right spot for me, but I'm open.
Okay.
This is the one that bothers me. This doesn't send it, I mean, I love the brick here.
The visual?
I'm proud whenever time I drive down it, thinking, okay, this is gonna be beautiful one day, but this looks kind of abandoned because it isn't built yet. So the next slide that has the rendering, I just go with, I'd either flip it and have a picture of, find some aesthetic that has the brick road on Main Street that either shows the sports stable, or maybe it's a night that is not so obvious, there are no cars parked there, that there's nothing there. And these renderings are great, like fantastic. So, love the renderings.
Okay.
But that's just, to me, the picture, I mean, it's a nice picture of the mountains, and yeah, we have a Main Street, but I don't love the, right. And then whenever I see, the second best, then the next question is, well, who's the best? And so,
Yeah.
consistently rated top suburb, or without
Top suburb.
misrepresenting it, let's just not say we're second.
And I mean, if we're looking for images, I think, we have this new beautiful piece of art that's right a little bit further than that.
Right.
That is aesthetically pleasing, that jumps out, and that can touch on quality of life and could be a good fit in here. And
Yeah.
we actually have somebody who's just took an absolutely phenomenal picture of it and has given rights to the town to be featured on our Facebook page. So maybe we talk to them, get permission for you guys to use it, and that's a much cleaner, beautiful picture that you can throw in there.
Great.
And if you're taking an old Chili Fest picture, is great. I mean, it is the biggest event we have. I'm not sure if it'll be here on September 7th, but if you are, please join us, buy a beer. And it's, we get, 500 people there, 700.
Yeah.
So that would be a cool picture.
Okay.
More than that? It's huge. 10,000 people.
Okay, we'll make that change.
Thanks. This is great.
And this is just the properties that are available. We're trying to highlight the office space.
Great.
Okay. thank you so much for your feedback. We'll incorporate those changes, recirculate it to the board, and ask for any additional comments.
For those watching at home, can we just tell people how to find you and say, I have a cousin that would love to invest in our town? Where do they find
Yes.
you? Give us your email.
Absolutely.
Tell us about yourself, please.
Sure. So Adam Hughes, our firm is Better City. My email address is adam@bettercity.us. You can also make a comment on our website, and that feeds directly to my email address. And then our phone number, 801-332-9006. And if you have an idea, if you have a business, if you know of someone that is looking to grow or expand or relocate, please reach out. We would love to facilitate a discussion and help bring them to Superior.
And Adam, I've got one more ask for you.
Mm-hmm.
For the reports going forward, if you could add an executive summary at the front, and it can be simple. It could just be
Okay.
a table that could go by task and just what had been completed in this month. Just bring all that current information up front. That way it's easy to digest it quickly. We'll all go through it. We'll read it in detail, but
Okay.
it helps with the navigation purposes and what
Sure.
I'm looking for.
Okay. We'll do that.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Matt, do we have any information on Adam listed out on our website anywhere? Could you think creatively and see if there might be some way we could put something out there? Because everybody didn't watch that when he just said what his address was. And, you know, if anybody wants to know more about economic development
Sure.
in the town of Superior, I'd like to make sure they know how to reach out to him.
Adam, you will buy anybody a cup of coffee for a good idea, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Not just a regular cup like a Frappuccino or an espresso?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not afraid to embarrass myself either if I have to do push-ups or jumping jacks. Any good idea.
Good.
All right.
Okay, I appreciate the update. Thank you very much. All right, next on our agenda is our second presentation from CAPS. Welcome, CAPS.
Good evening. Martin, we do have some slides. I'm going to put on my graphic design hat.
Daryl, do
The
you mind starting with your name?
I thought I did. I thought I said Daryl McCool. Sorry, the office space, the header on these, the font could be maybe a little bit stronger. And that was just a comment I also heard in the audience as well. So, okay. All right, good evening. Daryl McCool, Chair of CAPS Committee. I want to start off by apologizing that our slides were not in the packet. I had a misunderstanding about the deadline, so that was my fault, and I apologize. But since then, we've had our monthly meeting with Happy City, so I actually have a lot more details to fill in the slides with. So that was the plus. Before I dive into this, I did want to mention a couple of other things CAPS is working on. Some of you were able to attend the Meet the Artist event, which was really fantastic. And I'm sorry, Trustee Hammerly, I didn't hear all of your comments, so hopefully you can let me know what your thoughts were about it. But it was really great to have Dow Blumberg here and have him talk about the sculpture Zephyr and Triptych, which is in our roundabout now. And then the other thing is we have a new upcoming event, September 21st. It is called the Superior Shindig. It's line dancing lessons will be included, poetry reading, cowboy poetry reading, barbecue. We're going to bring the Very Prairie Dog pop-up, and hopefully some of the art from the main event will be on hand. So we learned that some of the artists gave us the rights to bring their pieces of art to other events. And so we have to look at that list and see what's available and what we could bring. And this is also in conjunction with the On the Same Page event with the Louisville and Lafayette Libraries. The Cowboy Poet is part of that On the Same Page event. So, okay, so master plan update, that's what we're here for. And, oops, sorry. Okay, so some of you were able to attend the Wellbeing Workshop, which was back in July. And the goal at the time was to develop vision for the role of arts, culture, and creativity in Superior. And the takeaways that Happy City shared with us were from this particular event, that the town has a huge need for indoor space, a tap room or pub. So, oh, they left. Creativity, creative wayfinding, linking the town through micro mobility. So micro mobility being walking, biking, scootering, any other way besides a car. Desire for residents to connect with each other in various community activities and events. And then also, there was a lot of talk about gardening as a social activity as well as a creative activity. And then these are just some of the folks and the activities that were going on. That is Mitchell and Cherry from Happy City running the workshop. And then next we had our main event, community engagement, and they had a beautiful community engagement all set up, and they had about 70 to 80 folks show up, but the rain dampened that. Let's see, what were the takeaways from that? Mostly it was their mapping activity. So they had people come up and place photos on the maps of their favorite places in Superior. And no surprise, parks, trails, green spaces, and outdoor activities were pretty prevalent for the mapping activity. And then opportunity spaces on the map were downtown Superior, Superior Marketplace, and Original Town. And he didn't give us specifics on the opportunity spaces and what that particularly means. I'm sure that will come out later on. So then after the main event on the 20th of July, on the 23rd, we had a well-being talk. And the takeaways from that were basically at that talk, they were looking at different potential creative placemaking activities and what interested people. And from that event, people were interested in events, social clubs and groups, physical art and public space improvements, like, for example, the crosswalk art, and then more greenery and murals. So that was our July 23rd activity with them. The next steps for us, and we've been working on, are the digital engagement. We spent a number of meetings working through what the survey is going to look like, and that will run through Chili Fest, September 7th. We hope to be able to have maybe laptops or iPads there so that people can maybe take the surveys at Chili Fest if they're interested. And then we'll have a second round, different questions based on feedback that we got from the first questions. So people from phase 1 and phase 2 can answer both surveys if they're interested. The other things that happened are the interviews have been going on. So 11 interviews have taken place. They were able to talk to Bill Jenks and Ranch Capital, which was fantastic. They've talked about, at Ranch Capital was particularly interested in talking about year-round outdoor space activities. So perhaps outdoor turf field and then in the winter engage it into an ice skating rink or something like that. I talked about connections, which is a theme that seems to be running throughout all of the conversations, and then opportunities for public art. So that was really good to hear that they were able to talk with them and get feedback from them. Some other things that happened, they had a chalk wall up, and the comments from the chalk wall, people wanted access to nature, desire for quality cafeterias and restaurants, performance space and theater, space for young people and seniors to hang out. And this one was kind of new to me, a time capsule, possibly to put some of our ideas and thoughts into, and Barry and somebody else can dig up years from now. So let's see. So the action items that we have tonight, and I think they were pretty much spelled out in the cover letter, but some of the numbers are a little bit off. We were having trouble narrowing down who we wanted to interview in the last interview slot. And we found out that it costs about $250 to interview another person. And so we're asking you guys tonight if it would be okay to have an additional $250 so that we could interview the two people that we think, as far as stakeholders, are important for being interviewed in the process.
Who are they?
They are Jim Payne and Sharon Nemechek. She's the executive director or the Louisville Library director. And I can tell you why. I mean, they both have really strong, good points to them. I think that we should be interviewing the Louisville Library. We have a huge amount of money that we spend over there, and to me, they're a huge stakeholder in this town. That's not to say that our residents aren't stakeholders either, and that's why we're asking for another $250 so that we could at least do both interviews.
So, from my perspective, I think we're probably talking about less than, see if I can do quick math, less than 1/100%. Certainly, so my perspective, I would leave this to your recommendation with approval from your staff liaison with Matt as necessary, but that's why we have staff. And I think if, you know, it just, well, it's certainly important. I think I would leave that type of thing, that recommendation to you, and would expect our staff liaison and Matt to approve that as requires.
And that's good to know. We just thought that we had to come to you for anything that was a change of scope or additional costs.
I think if the board, I don't want to get too bogged down in it, but from my perspective, I think if staff is saying, if you're getting a different message from staff than you're getting from this board, then I think, which is, you guys are pretty important to the community and the placemaking process. And as we go through this, getting stakeholder input is tremendously valuable. And if your recommendation is we need to spend a few more dollars to get the appropriate stakeholder interest, and staff is not supportive of that, then I will be having a conversation with staff over that.
And I don't know that that's the question. It was just more that the understanding is that we were to come to you for any change of scope and any additional costs, which is the next item on the agenda.
Not to interrupt, but under the code, any funding request has to go to the board in the work plan. It has to be approved via the work plan. So that's probably where this is coming from, I assume.
Well, this is outside our work plan. This is within the contract with Happy City.
Understood, but if it's a request from the committee, it has to go through the work plan, which has to be submitted to the board. So I'm just saying, that's where this is coming from.
Okay, so formally then, what do we do?
This is the first, we'll figure it out.
Okay. All right.
This is the first I've heard of this
Right, we had a
request.
similar process, similar issue on the, with bird boxes, right? I mean, how do you?
Exactly the same issue, which I was also going to bring up.
Right.
Joe, can we go over the other pieces also?
Yeah,
That way
absolutely.
we just talk with them as a whole.
Yeah, so the asks that were, so part of the concern is that the public engagement process that Happy City was doing at the main event got cut short because of the weather. And so there's a real concern that we didn't get to meet that public engagement component that we were hoping for. And so two things. We've been really trying to think cautiously about spending money. And so they could have come to Chili Fest for $9,000, and they had a certain deadline that we had to say yes or no by. So at the committee level, we said no, that, train us, we'll do what needs to be done at Chili Fest. But that is an additional ask. That's a $1,500 ask for them to train us to do with to run the activity at Chili Fest. And concurrently, we want to run the event at the Superior Shindig. The other piece of it is that we could have Happy City come and run the full event at the Shindig, and that would be a total of $7,000, but that would include the training for Chili Fest. And we could do we can do the $7,000. We could get the training, bring in Happy City for the engagement at the Shindig, and or we can do nothing. So those are options, all the options.
So Ken, this is what I tried to poorly do during my updates. With the memo, there's a $1,500 for the training for Chili Fest. There's also the $250, which I forgot to mention for the additional interview. And then there's the $7,000 plus the other $250. And the $7,000 was inclusive of the Chili Fest training, as well as bringing somebody in for the line dancing event.
Right.
So.
So, in your discussions with Happy City, did they provide any input on whether they feel that they have enough community input that they can effectively make a decision, or are they asking for more community input to help guide where?
A little bit of both. I mean, I think they're also very cognizant of costs. I mean, I know that they are. They're trying to be as cost conscious as possible, but at the same time, they want to produce, a great document that. So I do feel that within our committee, we would actually like them to come and run the engagement. We can do it, but they're the professionals. They are going to talk to people a little bit differently and gather information a little bit differently than we are going to be able to do it. We feel like we could run Chili Fest because Chili Fest isn't all Superior residents. It's, it's a mix of people. And so, the volume of Superiorites there is it's hard to know, but it's not the percentage. We figure the shindig is going to be primarily Superior residents.
Was that the primary reason not to want to do? Was it cost, or just the fact that we more mixed at Chili Fest that drew CAPS away from that?
A little bit, and at the time it was a $9,000 ask.
Right.
Almost $10,000 to do just come for Chili Fest.
So my off the cuff answer is I am just a little bit concerned. This Superior Shindig sounds awesome. I can't wait to go. Since it's the first of its kind, I'm concerned about the number of people we're going to get there, and we'll fall into the same category as some of the prior outreach events, and whether we'll get that value.
And that was a concern that we definitely had at the meeting. It's an unknown. We could have 50 people. I will say, when we did our block parties 2 years ago and we did the 6 parties around, we had between 60 and 100 to each of those individual parties. It was guerrilla marketing that we did on our own. So, Superior residents are pretty hungry for events.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of something new, just the volume of people we had come through the main event with the weather the way it was supposed to be. And, I think I would like to think people would come out, but it's definitely an unknown.
Yeah, I think the other challenge that we're facing is now schools started back up, and as have sports activities for youth and that sort of thing. And for that matter, college football will have started back up.
Yeah, we didn't look at the schedule, sorry.
My preference is if the committee truly believes that we need additional public engagement, and Happy City is on board that this will provide a much better, stronger final product to us. My preference is actually to spend the money getting them here for Chili Fest, because we know we'll get volume of people, and I think that's, and correct me if I'm wrong, that seems to have been our biggest challenge so far.
Yeah.
We just haven't heard enough voices.
Yeah.
Yep. So even though we'll have a mix, I think it'll be Superior residents that will want to stop and talk to them at Chili Fest. So that, even though it's more expensive, landing on the 9,000 and bringing back towards Chili Fest would be my preference.
Well, they cannot.
They cannot do that.
That ship sailed. They had to know by a certain date, and
Okay.
it was a month ago. So
Okay.
And we didn't know that there would be an opportunity for an additional public engagement. But then they did bring up Skate with Santa, which is too late, and it's not really, it's a pretty focused on one demographic, so.
Right.
Yeah, you can see the dilemma that we had.
Yeah.
My feeling on this, as I mentioned it before, I was really enthused to watch CAPS debate this, because the 5,000 is not insignificant relative to the budget or the town's finances, and I was really happy to see that discussion. I actually feel that, we should go ahead, and my feeling is I support the additional 5,000 for the line dancing engagement, really because the main event was a partial event. We didn't get out of it what we'd hoped for. Mother Nature, dumped on us, and that allowed us, or rather prevented us from getting out what we wanted. We decided, I think 4 months ago, to go ahead with this placemaking master plan update. And I really want it to be successful. If we can get more engagement, it costs a little bit more. I think it's beneficial to the overall effort, and I don't see a downside other than the expense. But at the same time, I am cognizant of the fact that this board, we have spent a lot of money this year, and incremental dollar is not small. That said, I struggled with this a little bit. Even at $5,000, it isn't a big deal, but it is still a big deal. So, given that we did decide to embark on the master plan itself, I want it to be successful, and I want it to be something that we can rely on for some time. So the more input we can get into the process, I think the better off we'll be.
The other thing is we can, you guys could agree to pay the $2,500 and then we would be trained for both events. And so that would be a lesser amount. And we're hoping to be able to find some volunteers to help with the Prairie Dog pop-up at the Shindig, so that we could focus on that if that's the way that you guys go.
So in terms of a action for funding this, Kendra, can you speak to, what?
Yeah,
what
this
needs-
is a little complicated. So technically, if the committee wants funding, they have to amend their work plan, and that's how they get funding. But it sounds like what the committee is asking for is for town staff to administratively, which is acceptable under the purchasing policy, to approve something with Better City, it sounds like, and that can happen, without board involvement. I think perhaps the board should say yay or nay on that, but technically the town manager can approve that without any board approval.
Is there a dollar amount that kind of becomes problematic that can be done by administrative?
I think it's 25,000, right? No, 15? I have to look back, but yeah, this is well within it, this request. I guess I'm a little confused. I think we probably need a better method of bringing this forward to you so that we know that this is an amendment to the work plan, this is a budgetary request for this and for the bird boxes. I think probably you need a more consistent way to do this so that you all know what you're asking for. And
How much was the original contract? 60,000?
It's 50,000 with 11,000 for travel.
So 61 total?
Yeah.
so it sounds like what town staff is asking for is a yay or nay on, because we could do an administrative extension of the contract or new contract for services to cover this with Better City, but that's, I think, where we are right now.
You mean Happy City?
Sorry, Happy City, Better City, Happy City,
You get
sorry.
your betters and happy cities.
And right now, what we're considering is whether to give staff direction to make an administrative amendment
Right.
to the work plan to allow an additional $5,000 to allow Happy City $6,000.
I think you could do it a different way. I think what I heard Kendra, we could give a yay or nay to the town staff, whether or not to amend the Happy City agreement, which I believe we can do today through under Matt's administrative
Modification.
powers.
True, I think it's the same thing. So
Right,
we
up
don't
to-
necessarily
up to at
need
least-
an amendment to the work plan, I think is
But
what
up to
you're
a
saying.
certain threshold for purposes of allowing them to do additional things that currently aren't budgeted for.
And Mike, so personally, I think we should probably spend the $7,500. My ask would be, I think we ask a lot of our community volunteers. I just want to make sure that we have both Dina and frankly, probably Kevin, also available for training, and that's in the scope, but so it's not just the volunteers, but we're also training our staff. I think that's a good, I'd be supportive of the larger, I think it was 7,200, 7,500, whatever the number is. So I think Neil made some good points that, we're in, let's do this thing right.
Yep. Agreed.
I'm concerned about this just being incremental benefit over what we have. I still am concerned we're not going to get the numbers we're looking for. We're going to have the same data that we already have. My preference is not to spend the money. I think the training makes sense. That way we have CAPS do a good job. I'm fine with the $250 to interview a second person. The additional event, I don't see that we're going to get the value out of it that makes this worth it.
Okay. Others?
Generally speaking, I defer to CAPS in terms of, the visioning for this project, and to have Happy City's, expertise in terms of what they need. I don't want to be, fiscally irresponsible and just approve, any and all, funding requests that are coming forward unless we're really going to get something that's going to substantially change, the value that we're going to receive in the end. I don't think we're seeing a lot of these. If this was the first of many, and then all of a sudden, $50,000 budget expense becomes a $100,000 budget expense, that would give me pause. We're just talking about 5 to 10% over what was originally budgeted. Things happen, and I think you need to be nimble, and I don't want to be, penny wise and pound foolish here in terms of what we're going to get. So if CAPS thinks that this is going to make a better and more useful work product in the end, then I would just say, let's go forward and make the investment.
Sandy, do you have any comments?
I'm somewhat torn on this. I don't know what's the best thing to do. I guess at this point, I would just trust whatever CAPS think is the better thing to do. I think, I'm supportive of you guys getting the training, because if by some reason one of these events falls through, it does give us the opportunity to try and do it at a different event. One of the things that I've suggested is, what about the Oktoberfest? It's another opportunity that if for some reason we don't get participation. So if you're trained, then we have the ability to use your expertise to get the information we need. So, when we originally did this, I think we had some questions about whether we'd be able to get it all done for $50,000. And so, in the big scheme of things, this is not $1 million. I think this is going to give us a better product. And so I would be supportive of giving you additional funding. I don't know the right number.
Okay, sounds like we have not unanimous, but majority support.
Well, and I appreciate you guys thinking about it thoughtfully, because we've spent a lot of time thinking about it and trying to be responsible and make the right decision. And initially, when we were presented with the $9,000 number for Chili Fest, we absolutely said no. And Patrick Hammer at the time said, I really think you guys need to reconsider and make sure you get as much community engagement as possible. So, that was coming from a staff level to kind of rethink and consider it. And we were already wanting to do Chili Fest, provided we could get the funding for training. But
Okay. All right, is there any further part of your presentation? Okay.
Just go out and enjoy the sculpture.
Yes.
Did you hand out the shindig? Oh, good, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, our next presentation, our third presentation, is ACES, Advisory Committee for Environmental Sustainability. Welcome, Essie.
Good evening, everyone. Do we have the other document as well up? Word document. It's in addition to this. It's the cover letter. Sorry, what did you say? Yeah. Cool. Perfect. Thanks. Cool. So everyone, Essie Snell with ACES. So I'd like to get the board's feedback on two recommendations that ACES came up with recently. And I don't have a set presentation, so I more just want to answer questions and address any concerns, or can I get the town's feedback on these? Essentially, the two recommendations are, first, to consider a gradual transition to natural and sustainable landscaping in select areas. And so particularly focusing on things like turf, medians, and really trying to reduce the amount of irrigation. And so this is looking from a water conservation standpoint, but also at promoting more natural landscaping that's pollinator friendly and those types of things as well. And there's some other notes I'm happy to go into on here. But the second recommendation is around adopting some additional municipal code amendments that would focus specifically on electric vehicle charging to help promote that and future-proof additional buildings going forward that are constructed. So it's primarily focused on new construction. So would you like me to go through more details on these first, or what's the preferred approach?
I just want to hear what the proposals are specifically.
Sure. Yeah, so the first one is right up here. So that the town consider a gradual transition to natural and sustainable, so natural, low or no water landscaping in targeted areas of town. Areas to be considered are all maintained turf, including medians, and reducing the amount of irrigation used for open space. I met with James Hartzig, who's from Duraroot, which is a local environmental consulting firm that has talked with the town and worked with the town previously. And they had a number of really interesting points about moving towards more natural landscaping. And so not necessarily xeriscaping in terms of just covering everything with rocks, but really having natural planting that can reduce maintenance by up to 80% in some cases, have much less water, lower water needs, support local pollinators. One of the things I thought was really interesting is that there's a group called the Xerces Society that focuses on bee-friendly planting and pollinator-friendly planting. And they have a recognition for cities or towns that are bee-friendly or pollinator-friendly. And so that's an example of one potential thing we could look for in a way that we could promote the town if we went forward with this type of plan. But at the minimum, essentially what we're looking at is, we've got a lot of development planned for the town. And so we want to make sure that we're still promoting water efficiency as part of that. Any questions about that one first?
So one of the things that we discussed at the last retreat, and Ken brought this up, was, this specific issue with respect to, and I know we talked about the medians along McCaslin and Rock Creek, mainly Rock Creek Drive, in particular, transitioning from turf to non-turf. And that was partly also a safety concern, right? Because
I think McCaslin was the primary.
Oh, McCaslin and Rock Creek Parkway, right?
Yep.
In terms of just like, it's difficult to mow on the median, it's not safe. So we thought that was independent of kind of the sustainability, is more of a safety issue and just a logistical kind of nightmare to mow those areas. But in terms of like the logistics of how, and then we also talked about moving away from the use of glyphosate in town. So I think that that's certainly a step in the right direction to becoming more pollinator friendly, right? But in terms of so there's a difference in my opinion between requiring development applications to come forward with landscape plans that are sustainable, and then transitioning existing landscapes to being more sustainable. One I think is more easier than the other. So if you could just kind of talk to that distinction, and is this really directed towards new development applications, or is this the plan really to transform the community as a whole? And if so, how exactly do we go about doing that, and what would the community look like?
Sure. So I think the overall goal is more the latter approach of trying to really look at both new and existing spaces and try to encourage sustainability for all of that. As you can tell, our recommendation is fairly vague and wide open. So we want to, if it's something that the board feels is important, we'd like to get direction from the board so we can spend some more time looking into that and looking at different specific options for how we actually get to a more sustainable place for both existing and new developments.
So Mark,
Sure.
First, thanks for presenting, and thanks for these two ideas. I'm excited about both of them. I think hopefully you are being provided with the opportunity to comment on development applications.
Yes.
So my perspective on that, I agree with everything that sustainable is, hard to define, right?
Sure.
But I would hope that as those, we get some pretty detailed landscape plans. I'll be honest, I tend to kind of skip over the landscape plan, so it's hard enough understanding road layouts and the aesthetics of the buildings. But I think it would be great for ACES to come and comment in detail around the landscape plans and whether or not there's opportunity for something to be more efficient, environmentally friendly, sustainable.
Sure.
And so from my perspective, I think the message from, at least my message is, yes, we are looking to be a little bit smarter about, do we really need golf course style manicured lawns and a median where a potential safety issue and it's just unnecessary and inefficient to water. And I think the message from this board is we're looking at that and we're going to pilot some things. And if it looks great and it's safer, then we'll continue to roll it out. Great reminder. And then on the other issue, for new development applications, I think keep doing the good work you guys are doing. And if a development is, something that is, has too much of a dependency on water or unnatural landscaping, or something, not unnatural, but something that's not native to Colorado, that's the type of feedback we'd love to get from ACES, my perspective.
So, okay. And I think we're still missing a piece. I mean, and I have the benefit of actually attending the ACES meeting as a liaison, and I hear a lot more of the conversation. And as you please correct me if I misrepresent anything, lots of conversation about the amount of green grass that we water and maintain currently in town. So we're not just talking about future developments. The conversation is about the town right now. There's concern about, I remember a specific conversation about grass that is on the opposite side of resident homes facing McCaslin, for instance, that's being watered and maintained, and it's manicured grass. It's not natural grass, and what value is that adding? And there are places within town where we can actually move in the direction of more natural and sustainable plantings. I think where I would like to give ACES direction, and this also includes staff direction as well, because ACES can't do it by themselves, is this is clearly step one of 100, 200 steps if we're actually going to change the character of Superior. And it has a lot of community engagement that's going to have to take place. We actually have to define what truly is a low-hanging fruit beside medians, and see what can we actually change for the better and what actually goes in there. I opened up the slides that came from Dura Root, and there's some great ideas in there. I think we can do this tastefully. I think it can look nice. I don't think we're going to diminish the value, but I think all ACES is looking for is their interest in actually doing this from the town board. And if so, there needs to be direction to staff to actually use resources and staff time to pull together how to do this, and ACES needs to know to put that on their work plan. So I'm in favor of that type of a direction, and I think that's where ACES is looking for guidance from us.
So I like the idea, in concept, right? Like I obviously I want us to be more sustainable to the extent that we can be. I guess what I'm struggling with is understanding kind of where the real bang for the buck would result in terms of, if we did an audit and we said 85% of our water usage is going to water the lawn at Purple Park, and then 15% of the water usage is everything else. That would be a data point from which we can kind of draw conclusions as to, okay, well, if we spent our attention on that 15%, would that be enough of a win, right? Because I think if we decided we were going to rip up the turf at Purple Park, the community would probably be up in arms about it, because it's a park that everybody has come to know as a manicured lawn, versus the green space along McCaslin, which is not necessarily, nobody thinks about that lawn as being particularly important. But if it turns out that maybe 50% of our water usage is going along that area, well, maybe then that's more of a priority, because we're actually wasting so much water on turf that we don't really care about. So I guess from my perspective, it would be helpful to understand, and I don't even know how you'd go about doing this, if it can be done easily, but figuring out kind of where the big wins would be from a sustainability aspect, or if it's just such a kind of monumental task because it's a gradual transition of trees and turf and everything all together.
And I think, in that excellent point, I think that's one of the hundreds of steps that needs to happen, because we don't know those answers. And we don't have any direction to staff or to ACES to get those answers. So
Although town staff is actually working with Resource Central right now to get some irrigation consulting in to try and take that very first step of identifying some of the biggest areas for potential improvement. So that is something that we're looking at. And one of the other approaches too, and sorry to interrupt, but one of ACES members looked at Google Maps actually, and you can see very clearly where a lot of the green spaces are that aren't in areas like parks that are heavily trafficked. And you can see very clearly there's a lot of manicured lawn that isn't really benefiting anyone. And so those types of areas, if we can convert that to more natural landscaping with flowers and things like that, so they still look nice. Certainly don't want it to be weedy, but you know, we can cover it in natural plants like that that would support pollinators and cut down our maintenance costs and water costs. So those are some of the ideas so far.
I think what they need is the go-ahead to at least take those first steps. Because right now there is no green light to take these steps and spend money on the actual study. I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding, because I know we didn't have it budgeted. So unless we found other money to be able to actually have Doru come in and do that analysis, I know they're going to come and hopefully talk to ACES and provide a high-level overview. But my understanding is that an actual detailed analysis would require an actual contract.
Yeah, that's correct too. And then the other part of it, in addition to that, which is the core component, it's just that, you know, there may be opportunities to work with some of the other advisory committees too to roll this out and find specific ways to move forward. But certainly that's going to take a lot of additional time beyond what we're currently planning. So if that's something that's important to the board, we'd love to do that. But we just want to get direction and guidance from the board about whether it is something worth pursuing.
You know, having been the sort of ad hoc liaison to you guys for a short while, I'm really glad to see you bringing this forward. I'm not sure where you go from here, but I think I would like to see a look at that, because I agree, there's lots of spaces in town that we manicure that we don't really need to. There's areas that we do need to manicure. We need to manicure Purple Park. We need to manicure Community Park. Absolutely. Places where our residents spend time on that grass. A couple of concerns that I have. The first one is, you know, we tried to do Wildflower Park, and that was supposed to be pretty natural environment with wildflowers. We didn't do a very good job at it. And so I'm concerned that if we're going to do this, I don't want us to invest until we know that we're going to do it right. Because we don't want to have areas that have been attractive in town become weedy and you know, Wildflower Park didn't quite end up the way we wanted it to, and we're still working on it. It's a work in progress, but I just want to make sure that if we try and make this conversion, you know, and then my second concern is right now we're short-staffed. And so I don't want you to try and bite off more than you can chew in the short term, but I would like to see us move forward with this. Maybe not in the next 6 months, but if you could think about it maybe later in your work plan in 2020 or something. But I'm just a little concerned that we are trying to get our staff to pull off too much right now.
Sure, that's a valid concern. And I would say too, just with regards to Purple Park, at least as I understand it, and there may be other things that I haven't seen, but that was actually, you know, at least in part a result of trying to over-maintain something that was designed to be natural. So all the annual flowers popping up got mowed down before they could reseed. So that's actually a perfect example of where we're, you know, spending a lot of town money to maintain spaces that otherwise wouldn't need to be if we, you know, did them properly. So
one thing I'd add that I don't see on there right now, and I think this is great. You know, I worry less about water wastage because it's non-potable water, so you know, at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. But you know, I guarantee you, Vargas has tremendous amount of data on what they spend for different parts of town in terms of, you know, human capital. You know, they probably spend a lot more time mowing tiny little chunks of grass throughout town than Purple Park. I mean, Purple Park's a couple guys on riding motors, and they're just busting up and down, and they're done very quickly. But then we've got these little patches of, like, you know, 50 by 2 feet, you know, stretches of grass that are incredibly difficult to manage. You know, given, and Sandy brings up a great point, town staff is definitely going to be constrained in the interim, but you know, we can probably, you know, work with Vargas to get some, you know, some anecdotal data that we can start, laying on the map and say, hey, let's look at these areas because these are prohibitively more expensive or more time consuming to deal with. And maybe layer that in as we work through this, 6 months from now.
Okay. Yeah, good suggestions or good discussion. And I'm also supportive of continuing to look at this, but probably with an eye at something during the 2020 work plan. Okay, shall we move on to to your second proposal?
Absolutely. So our other recommendation, which is something that we've been working on for a while, with the board had previously suggested that ACES focuses on ways to promote electric vehicle infrastructure and electric vehicle adoption within the town of Superior. And so one of the recommendations we have is to essentially adopt basically the Boulder Municipal Code around electric vehicle charging equipment. And so I can open that up in a moment, but essentially what it does is it mandates that there's a certain base number of charging receptacles installed in each different type of building, so residential, multifamily, and commercial, to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support the growing adoption of electric vehicles. And for the most part, these are basic 120 volt outlets or level 2, so 240, which is basically like what your dryer would run on or an appliance in the home. So these are not level 3 super expensive fast chargers. These are just providing basic infrastructure into new buildings or when major renovations happen to make sure that the town is supporting and kind of laying the groundwork for electric vehicles going forward. So I'll go ahead and pull up the language too, so we can go through it.
And I hate to interrupt and be a naysayer here, but Boulder's home rule, we're not. So I'm not certain that we can do this. So I just want to throw that out there. I've not looked into it, but Boulder's the only one that does this, and they are home rule. No one else does this. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we get too far. I'm happy to look into it or not, depending on the board's direction.
Thank you.
So just to step through it, and I'll kind of skim, but all of the documents have been shared with the board so you can read through the entire thing. For new residential construction, it's basically asking for a 120 and a 240 volt outlet, just so that there's something in the garage that people can plug into if they want to charge their vehicle, if they buy something. A big part of this, and the reason that this is valuable, is that if you don't currently have the infrastructure in place for putting in a charging system, it can be really expensive to run digital lines, especially if you're looking at 240 volt systems or higher. And so this ensures that any new homes that go in going forward will have that infrastructure built in from day one. So it's not a tremendously expensive additional investment for homeowners. This is about residential renovations. So if you're basically converting a garage to a habitable space, you still have at least one outlet available that a car can use to plug into. For multifamily, again, you're looking at having a certain number, I believe it's 10%, can't quite see the text from here, having at least a 240 volt and a 120 volt charging outlet. And for multifamily, this is really important because a lot of people that live in multifamily buildings simply can't charge their cars because it's hard to stretch a extension cord all the way out from the building to your car, even if you can do that logistically. And so this ensures that people living in these types of buildings are able to charge if they get an electric vehicle. So basically, this is saying that you need to have at least 10% with available outlets in order to charge cars. And this is, again, for looking at parking spaces. And then about half of those have to be dedicated specifically for electric vehicles, rather than just having anyone be able to park there. There's also a requirement to have a level 2 charging station as well. And then for commercial, it's basically the same type of language where you're looking at a certain percentage of the total number of parking spaces and making sure that you have some sort of receptacle available so that people can charge.
Okay, thanks for that intro comments. Neil?
So in case anyone didn't realize, today's another high ozone day and people are advised not to exercise outdoors until midnight. which in my mind is completely unacceptable for a metro area that thrives on being in the outdoors. So I applaud you guys for going down this path. And full disclosure, I've had an EV for 3.5 years. I just rolled 42,000 miles this morning. And me evangelizing about my damn car got my dad to buy a Tesla too. So I don't have a Tesla, but he got a Tesla. So 2 EVs and 2 homes within Superior, and I will keep evangelizing them until people make me stop. That said, the first thing you have on your list, I think, is fantastic. One of the inhibitors or issues I had was bringing my indoor level 2 charger, actually installing it, running the cable, and so on and so forth. But when I compared what we have here, and Kendra, notwithstanding the fact that we may or may not be able to do this, Boulder goes one step further, and they specify the amperage and the wire type. And as long as we're doing that, I'm okay, because if you hook a 240 to a 20, you're going to trip it every time. Just basic math. So item 1, no problem. I think it's great. I start to have a little more trouble with items 2, 3, and 4. 2, if you're rehabbing a space that you own, I'm a little challenged with telling somebody who's rehabbing their own home that they got to add an EV outlet when they may never plan on getting an EV car. So take that with a grain of salt. And then with 3 and 4, you bring up a good point, an interesting point when it comes to apartments and using an extension cord. So one of the first rules with an EV, you should never use an extension cord. So adding plug-in areas for multifamily housing, fantastic idea. I struggle with items 3 and 4 with the percentage allocation here. And if I look at the Superior marketplace, Costco has 450 parking spots. So by this math, we need to have 45 dedicated EV spots, and let's say 22 of those would be full-time dedicated plug-in spots or EV parking spots. Right now there's 5. If you take the EVgo, 3 spots, and the 2 for the charge point, they're rarely full. The guy from Brixmor here brought up a good point. In California, they're often very full. Colorado, we're not there yet. I'm a little hesitant to go so far so fast. 10% to me is a very large number. Boulder is looking at 2%. I'd be happy with 2 to 5. I struggle just with the dedicating it greater than the ADA allocation, which is 2%. Because a lot of people get frustrated when they see the Tesla charging networks woefully empty. I've seen plenty of pictures of people parking their F-150s at the Tesla charging station because there's no other parking. And I don't want to create that animosity towards electric cars. Because, I'll be honest, right now, movie night at Williams Field, great opportunity to go see a movie. If I get there late, I have a dedicated spot for me right up front for my EV because it's usually empty. And that's not right. I don't need to charge. I charge my car at home. I don't need to plug it in there. I don't need the dedicated spot. So I want us to balance the allocation level relative to what makes sense for some of our area and where we are right now in the adoption curve. We're just not a California. Boulder, and I see a heck of a lot more EVs in Boulder County than I do where I work down in Arapahoe County. There's like none. But over here, there's a lot of them. And I want us to be careful that we don't push it too fast too soon. But overall, this is the right direction. We absolutely have to go down that path. And if I had a 240 outlet in my garage, it would have saved me $1,000 up front. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we would certainly be open to looking at different percentages and different kind of configurations. This is we figured the Boulder Municipal Code as it currently stands would be a good framework to start off on, but certainly we're flexible to discuss those.
And I appreciate Neil's points. As a person who doesn't own an electric vehicle, it's nice to actually hear the context and a little bit more detailed information. I am not as concerned as Neil is with the going too far too fast. Just in trying to prepare for tonight's meeting, I pulled up as many resources as I could about adoption rate overall. I found a very informative report, the 2019 Electric Vehicle Outlook Report by the Bloomberg New Energy Finance Group. And by 2030, so roughly a decade from now, they're forecasting nearly 40% of vehicle sales in the United States are going to be electric vehicles. So 10 years from now, 40% of those vehicles being sold are EVs. I don't think we're going to get too far too fast because it's coming along, and increasing electric vehicles happens to also be a priority of the current Colorado administration. I think we're going in the right direction here. I think my preference is maybe this is something, because my understanding is what we would need tonight, A, Kendra's going to see if we can even really do anything here. But B,
I'm dubious, I'm just warning you.
well, if we can, then staff will have to actually draw up a code change. And I think this is something that we put on staff and come back with a recommendation. Does it match Boulder? Are we putting too much in here, and come back with the pros and the cons and why we're doing things. And ACES, I absolutely want to hear the ACES point of view once that language is drafted. But I think that's how we get to where we need to go.
So for 2.5 years, we've been asking for an example of why we would need to go to home rule, and we haven't come up with a good one. So if this is the single example, so it's interesting. Having said that, while I appreciate everything, all the data that Ken said, I hope that electric vehicle adoption will be as high as it is. I would hope to purchase an electric vehicle at some point in the future. I don't now. Having said that, if I purchase an electric vehicle, I'll be grateful for the community resources where I might be able to plug in. I'll be grateful that I will make that investment in my own home so I could charge. I will intentionally look for an apartment if I was an apartment dweller that had some electric vehicle. But this is, we're in Colorado. It's a pretty western state. I will not tell people what they should do in their home unless it's a safety issue or the right thing. This is, to me, nanny state. No way would I support standards requiring new construction of this type of thing. No way.
I mean, one.
I would voluntary programs. I know you have some influence in Energy Stars. You may know I was involved there 15, 20 years ago at its infancy. I love voluntary programs. I have no problem with folks like Thrive wrapping themselves in a green cloak and talking about their sustainability. And if that puts them ahead of other developers that are applying to work with us, no problem with that. But changing the code, personally, never.
Okay. I mean, I would say too that we do have, green building codes and things like that that are specifically designed to help promote
and
sustainability.
I think at the national level, I think the LEED standards and things like that, that's where things should be set. But when municipalities start telling people what they can and cannot do within their four walls, that to me is pretty scary, and the government, particularly local municipalities, should stay out of it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I guess my concern is that, we're not Boulder, and Boulder can do things that we can't because of who Boulder is and how Boulder is. And every requirement that we impose on our code on developers is another potentially increasing cost that makes our developers less competitive with people who are building something in Louisville or Broomfield. And, we just need to be mindful. We always talk about the unintended consequences here. And, we can have the right motivations, right? We all share the values of we want to be sustainable. We want to encourage people to, use less carbon and pollute less and stop contributing to the ozone problem along the Front Range. But the question is, how do we get there? Do we get there through governmental action that's kind of mandating something that's going to change behavior versus trying to incentivize people to do things differently, or just let the market kind of take care of itself? And that's kind of the philosophical question. And generally speaking, I don't see it right now that it merits making a code change that would impose a requirement on new builders to put these things in there. I think if these builders are being smart and they're understanding who their market is, especially in the apartment buildings getting built, multifamily buildings being built in Superior, they should be thinking of EV stations within their facility so they can better market their properties. And with respect to people who have existing single-family homes or existing multifamily homes, if they want to do improvements, I'm very reluctant to impose any sort of requirement to have EV charging stations in their homes.
Yeah. So, electrical codes already require many things in new construction, and many of those things are not used by a lot of the consumers. I mean, number of outlets per wall and things of that nature. So if the stat that Ken cited is truly correct, that we're going to be going to 40% EV in a decade, I think the cost of installing another circuit or two in a garage is minimal at the time of construction. So I would be open to that, but I really think it's more something that builders should probably be doing anyway, because that's just smart feature offering. It's like offering a gas hookup for your grill instead of doing it after the fact and wishing you had one. You want to get rid of the charcoal or the tanks. So it's more about just doing things for the future of your house. So I think that's where we're headed, and I think electrical codes are probably headed there eventually anyway. So that's probably going to take care of the new construction piece. Not as much in favor of requiring it on retrofits. That's really more, that gets more to the individual's choice. If that's what they want to do, then great, let them do it and do it at their cost. The commercial piece, I'm a little hesitant on that too. I'm not an electric vehicle owner, might be at some point in the future. I go to stores and I see a lot of electric vehicles parked in regular spaces, and they go there and then they go home, or they go and do multiple errands and then they go home. And so it's still a little puzzling to me why we feel like we need to supply all of this charging out and about when people are kind of going to and from. But the primary, these vehicles are really getting designed so that they can leave, get charged at home, and then go do their thing and then come back to home. But all this infrastructure that we're creating out and about is just, it's a little bit not as supportive of that.
And I think you raise a great point as well. One of the reasons to do this through code, just like you would have electric code or building codes or conservation codes, which we've already adopted for the town of Superior specifically, is that it's much less expensive to install it from day one than it is to go in and retrofit a facility. And that's especially true of multifamily buildings and apartments, where if you're going to retrofit in additional charging, it's really incredibly expensive, as opposed to just doing it right from day one, where it adds minimal expense. So I do appreciate the trustees' concerns about not wanting to overregulate, and absolutely understood. But I think, certainly we're not trying to push anyone into buying an EV if they're not already interested, and I certainly wouldn't want to force any of those types of things on. This is more about making sure that we're providing the right infrastructure so that we can be future-proofing our town. Also, both Boulder and Denver are working on creating an EV charging corridor along 36. And so their goal collectively is to make sure that adoption of electric vehicles is as fast as possible in our area. And so as a town that's right off of 36, if we can have codes and kind of practices and standards that support electric vehicles, I think we'll be really well positioned going forward to help embrace those changes as they come.
On the difference of the cost, there's a study, I don't own this study, but it's the source is the Plug-in Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Cost Effectiveness Report for San Francisco. So a case study considers a parking lot with 10 total spaces and 2 EV parking spaces, compares the EV infrastructure installation at the time of new construction versus building retrofit. And so for that, so not a perfect example, new construction about $920, retrofit about $3,500. And so let's just call that a retrofit might be 4 times as expensive as new construction, but it's still not, we're not talking about 100 times, and we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars. So with that, I would not, since 2 people brought up kind of the cost difference between new construction and retrofit, just found this study. That'd be a couple data.
Is that multi-family? Or?
In this case, it was a parking lot with 10 total spaces.
Right. So I think there's a distinction here when it comes to, you know, single-family homes, right? You know, retrofitting your garage is $1,000. Doing it at the point of construction, it's maybe $100 because you're laying the fiber or laying the wire and you're sticking an outlet in the wall.
The raceway, right.
I mean, it's, you know, the incremental cost to the builder is immaterial, in my mind, immaterial relative to the cost of building a home. And, you know, item 1 on this list is the most attractive to me. You know, without the EV sign, I mean, if people want to plug an arc welder in, they should be allowed to. But the point is, you know, if you do it at the point of construction, it's prohibitively or significantly cheaper as opposed to a retrofit. So if either of you are thinking about, you know, getting an EV, one of the inhibitors to you is going to be where are you going to plug it in? Because if you plug it into your regular 110 volt, it's going to take forever to charge. Or you're going to plug it into your office. The whole charging network, to me, I don't even care because my car goes from my office to my home, and in between, I don't want to have to stop somewhere along the way to charge it. So for me, it's the office and the home are the critical components for actually using an EV. You know, all the using the VW money to build this charging network, it's great, you know, message, but people aren't going to pull over just to charge unless, you know, they're shopping, maybe. But, you know, and that's where I'm not a big fan of the commercial, you know, retrofitting a commercial parking lot. People coming and going from Costco, they're not going to plug in. The charger next to the police station, I used it for a little while, but it's a pain. I'd rather just charge at home or my office. And if my home had the 240 volt outlet, you know, at construction, it would have made it easier and I wouldn't have big holes in my drywall.
And hopefully one day the builders will smarten up.
And I think we can push them on. I mean, if we don't mandate that code, I think we should evangelize it. You know, hey, all these new homes that we're building across the street, guys, think seriously about putting a 240 volt.
And I think that's what we're asking for. That's why
I would like to mandate it personally. Like I like what ACE is doing here. So
I think, and therein lies, I mean, we have 4 pieces here that we're really discussing. The new homes make sense. Commercial, in my mind, makes sense. Home to work. Renovations, I understand those arguments. I can let that fall to the wayside. That's not something I'm tied to. But I think the way I look at this, it's really much akin to the other transportation problems that we hear. So public transportation, we hear time and again from Community Solutions, from everybody else, that we have a problem with the last mile. So we can get people from point A to point B, but how do you get from your home to point A, and then how do you get from point B to your work? When we're trying to allow people to make that decision to adopt an electric vehicle and make that purchase, these are real constraints. This breaks down a barrier at Neil said, a very nominal cost up front. And
at some point that barrier, so I love the dialogue, right? And we got to be careful, we got to Clint will time check us, right? But that barrier will be overcome with entrepreneurial innovation. What we're talking about is taking our time and our community's time and encouraging this in the code, which, to Mark's good point, may have some unintended consequence. And in my moral fiber is against everything I believe in, which is, you know, telling people what they can and should not do. It's a form of, I'll use the term, public welfare, corporate welfare, where you're effectively subsidizing the innovators. Allow the innovators the opportunity to innovate and be entrepreneurs and solve for that last mile problem. But I do not think that corporations deserve us to be mandating so they no longer have to solve that last mile problem. I want them to solve the last mile problem, and they will. It's just, we just want to accelerate it, which communities like San Francisco and Boulder and those communities will do. But in this community, it's just not, it's not appropriate.
I will say that in my day job, I work with utilities across North America and the US and Canada, looking at a lot of different initiatives around energy efficiency and renewables. And they're looking at from the perspective of how do you actually do cost-effective, move forward in a cost-effective way. And so they're very much, at least the people I've worked with, are on the very innovative side. And one of the consistent barriers to electric vehicle adoption, which many utilities, as you might guess, are very supportive of because it's about revenue generation. But if you don't have the infrastructure in place, especially for multifamily buildings, it's very, very difficult because the building owners don't have as much of a direct incentive to go in and do $1,000 retrofits, even if their tenants, they'd have more tenants, they're forward-looking coming in and into that community. And it's sort of a similar issue on the single family side too, although not quite as extreme. And so, I see this, at least just personally, and I respect the trustees' views on this as well, but as sort of an additional small thing like we have with electric codes and our green building codes, which we just renewed and updated a couple years ago. where we're saying, you know, for this community, we want to make sure that we're supporting people and setting people up for success. And so we're not going to tell people what they should be, you know, driving, what they should be doing with their personal lives. But if there's a, you know, small, very incremental cost that would help support the town for future success, then that probably makes sense. And that's not intended to, you know, be a nanny state in any way. It's just making sure that we're being supporting
There's
everything
like
as a
the,
community.
consultant term for, you know, we could be the, you know, we could be on the bleeding edge, and which is sort of what you're asking us. Or I suppose we could be the fast follower. I don't object to being the fast follower when we are adopting a national standard for appropriate energy efficiency. I think that's the smart decision after other communities have done it. Being on that bleeding edge, which will have the unintended consequences, what will tell people what to do within their home, I think it's a mistake, and it's not, to me, it's not Western. I mean, it's not only not superior, it's just, you know, we're a frontier state, man. I just don't like doing it.
Okay, let's have closing remarks on this. And we need
I was just
wrap
going to
up.
suggest maybe we should just have Kendra to just take a look into this to see if this is even an option. And if it's
Good
not,
point.
then it's an academic exercise. And then
Yep.
we need to have the conversation as to whether or not we want to go home rule. So like, why don't we just table it for now and then see whether this is a possibility, and then
Yeah, I'm happy to do
revisit
that.
it.
That's good.
Okay,
Thanks everyone
All
for
right.
your time.
Really
Thank you.
good.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Thank
though.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all right, we are on to item number 2F4, Xcel Energy presentation. Welcome to Craig.
Thank you. So down here, okay, thanks very much. Good evening, Mayor. Nice to see you again, trustees. I want to thank Matt for inviting me in tonight. I really liked this last discussion. That was really interesting. A nice setup for what we're going to talk about now. My name's Craig Eicher. I'm the area manager for Xcel Energy. I kind of regionally over the relationships with our communities here in Boulder County as well as Grand County, just across the divide. And we have been very excited since December about the new course that our company has taken in our 8-state region to aim for a carbon-free future, a dramatic reduction in emissions around our 8-state region. And the conversation you just had, I think, is very telling for me. I heard someone say, we're not Boulder, and I understand that. I understand that everybody in the state of Colorado isn't Boulder. But more and more people, in fact, 90% of our customers tell us they want us to move in the direction of lowering the environmental impact of what we do, but also keep the reliability there and keep the rates affordable. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about tonight. And this isn't going. It is not going. All right. How about that? So here's our 8-state region. We serve throughout the Midwest and upper Midwest, of course, in Colorado. And we have about 1.5 million electric customers in Colorado, 1.4 million natural gas customers in Colorado. And again, these are the 3 pillars. Lead the clean energy transition, do it in a way that enhances the customer experience and keeps our bills affordable. How are we going to do it? And well, this is really it's a testament to a story that we began in 2005, just after Amendment 37 passed in the state of Colorado. Many of you may remember that Xcel Energy, the company then, opposed Amendment 37, which was the first renewable energy standard in the country. It was the first time that a state said, we're going to impose on the investor-owned utilities, there are 2 of them here in Colorado, a requirement that by a certain date, there must be a certain amount of renewable energy delivered to your customers. And at the time, the company thought it was going to be hard, it was going to be expensive, it was going to wreck the system's reliability. Some of those concerns were well-founded at the time, but we soon found out after Amendment 37 passed in 2004 that the road towards a cleaner energy supply was a lot less complicated than we thought it was at the time. By 2008, we'd already passed the first hurdle. We had 10% renewable energy on our system, and our rates didn't get affected, and our reliability was just fine. So Xcel Energy went back to the legislature and our commission, the Public Utilities Commission, and we asked to increase the renewable energy standard to 20%. by 2020. And it turned out that wasn't as big of a hurdle as we thought it was going to be. So we went back a third time and we asked for it to be raised to 30% by 2020, I apologize. That we just passed in 2017. So we're already well past that hurdle. And we're not going to stop. So as you can see, by 2018, we have a 38% reduction in carbon since 2005. We're aiming for an 80% reduction by 2030, and by 2050, a carbon reduction of 100%. We're going to be 100% carbon free. We'll talk a little bit about how that's going to look and how it's going to work. So this is where we went to get verification, scientific verification on our plan. We conducted an analysis with the University of Denver and one of the lead IPCC authors to determine whether or not our assumptions were within the realm of reality. A lot of people have set renewable energy goals throughout the country. Most of them have set those as completely aspirational visions without any real idea as to how they're going to achieve those goals. We determined that we were going to aim for the highest goal that's currently being talked about, and that is to maintain what they call as a 2 degrees centigrade cap on the increase in global temperature. And again, I'm not here to tell you that any of this stuff is what you should believe in. I'm telling you this is what people are expecting of our company. Overwhelmingly, 90% of our customers expect us to look into this, and we went to verify what our assumptions were going to be on a scientific level, and it came back that we were well within the range. In fact, we were below the range. We are ahead of the curve. And so already, as you can see, the yellow portion of the timeline here, we're entering that period, that next 10 years, where we're going to be reducing our carbon emissions by 80% by 2030. And this is getting an awful lot of attention. I don't want to dwell too much on how people have reacted to this plan, because a lot of that is just excitement and without any real idea as to how we're going to approve it or achieve it. But we have gotten 60 million hits on social media, and we're kind of excited about being able to chart this path while making it affordable and keeping our reliability high. And so, Trustee Ryan, you talked about innovation. You're right. Innovation is going to be a key part of the entire nation, an entire world moving in the direction of having a cleaner energy supply, because we don't anticipate our customers are going to ask us to serve them less energy in the future. It's only going to increase. But a lot of people focus on the public policy. That's kind of the easy side of this four-legged stool. All you have to do is get in a room, pass a few laws, pass a few measures, and you feel good about yourselves walking out of that room thinking that you've solved the problem. When in reality, you need to incorporate all of these other issues into the totality of the decisions that you're making. So innovation is going to be key for us beyond the 2030 timeline. The 80%, that last 20% carbon reduction is going to require us to be able to incorporate technologies that aren't currently invented or aren't currently feasible on the economic sense. We're going to need stakeholder support. We need everybody. We can't just have the environmentalists on our side. We have to have our large businesses. We have to have our chambers of commerce, our policymakers at the local level, all of our customers, including our low-income customers, because reliability and affordability is still important to everyone. All of this is being brought into here. So here's our path to 80% by 2030, very similar to what we've been doing over the past 10 years. We have been the leading supplier of renewable wind energy over the past 13 years in the United States. Out of the 3,200 utilities there are in the country, we've been #1 for over a decade. We're going to hit energy efficiency as hard as we have, probably even more, and we're going to look at electrification of multiple segments, including transportation. We're going to invest in the grid to make it smarter so that we know more about what's going on out there and can talk to our customers. And in Minnesota, where we have a couple of nuclear plants, we're going to keep them. But this is what we're looking at, is that aspirational last 20 years, last 20%, I mean. We are looking at already what's available, understanding that some of these will fall away and not be feasible, and some may end up being feasible. Certainly, this list will look very different by 2030. Down in the lower right, SoCalGas has been talking about this new process where they are doing hydrolysis and creating hydrogen energy. Of course, you can use that to fuel cars. We do out at the NREL site here in just outside Superior. But they're also adding carbon dioxide to the hydrogen molecules and creating methane, which they can then use to as a sort of a renewable natural gas. And we're going to have extra carbon dioxide for some time. But carbon capture is looking like it's going to be one of those technologies that everyone's going to seize on at some point. Here's what our cities are doing around the state of Colorado and in Minnesota, our service territory. These are the ones who have set renewable goals or carbon reduction goals. And I show you this slide because it's so important for you to understand how our communities are expecting us to move in this direction. Many of our customers have said in many surveys, they're willing to spend a little bit more money when it comes to cleaning up the environment, but not too much. And they certainly don't want their reliability to be suffer. And just as a matter of comparison, these are the larger investor-owned utilities around the country and the goals they've set for themselves. Ours are beating every one of them. Progress to date, 38% reduction. We're already ahead of the commitments made in the Paris Climate Accord, as well as the Clean Energy, Clean Power Plan from the last administration. Again, this is not a political statement. I'm not here to tell you that those were valid plans or that they were invalid plans. I'm simply telling you, explaining to you that the plan that we've set for ourselves and are already achieving has surpassed those plans. So we want to make sure that our customers are empowered individually to make their own choices in life. So we're going to take our system in a certain direction, but for those customers who want to go even further and faster, we have multiple renewable energy programs as well as energy efficiency programs that will help them make decisions to go above and beyond. And so we're excited about Renewable Connect. It was the first of its kind in the nation, whereby we allow you to subscribe to up to 100% wind or solar energy. You get the renewable energy credits, which means you can say now that this meter is being driven by whatever percentage of renewable energy you subscribe to. It is at a very small cost. In fact, if natural gas goes back up in price, it'll be a cost savings to our customers. And of course, all of our other renewable energy programs we've had for many years and have been very successful. So the challenges. What does it take to have a 100% renewable grid? People ask us that an awful lot. So if you can do this much, why aren't you doing 100%? Late last year, during the shoulder months of October, in September and October, we were finding ourselves reaching ever higher records of renewable energy production on our Colorado grid. And in fact, in 1 hour in October, we achieved 70% renewable energy to the we met 70% of the demand with renewable energy. On one day, we met 65% of the demand with renewable energy. And that, of course, is because we have a relatively low demand during that period of year on the electric side, but we have an awful lot of wind. The problem is, though, if you end up overbuilding your system so that you can meet 100% of the year with renewable energy, you're now overbuilding the grid. You're overbuilding your production, as well as the size of your wires and everything else that feeds the individual meter. And so when you do that, it's going to cost an awful lot of money. And this is sort of a graphic representation of that. And this is the problem with trying to aim for a 100% renewable grid. What we want to do is incorporate multiple technologies, not decide today what that technology is going to be 20 years from now. We want to be open and agnostic. So here's a battery that we own, for example, that we installed out at the Peña Next Station by DIA. It's a microgrid out there. Panasonic has incorporated a lot of smart street technology into this sort of a pilot, and it allows that development to island itself from our system and then run completely off that battery, which is fed by a very large photovoltaic system on the roof. But batteries are expensive still, and they run us for about 4 hours, and then they're out. And so we are going to require at some point some kind of affordable and very reliable grid-tied system of storing energy that we can then carry ourselves through those periods of time when there is no wind and there is no sun. So we want to focus on the goal. Public policy should incorporate those other elements, as I was talking about. We need to keep all options open when it comes to technology. And lastly, I want to show you that our energy efficiency leadership is still there. It's very sexy to talk about renewable energy and carbon reduction when what we really need to do is get down to looking at each of our buildings, if this is what we want to do, and seal up those envelopes, improve our lighting, improve our HVAC systems, and do whatever we can. We have hundreds of rebate programs that we can provide. And finally, this is what our bills have been doing. So I'm happy to tell you that all of this is not costing you any money. And if it is costing you money, it's very little. In our future, when we incorporate the smarter grid, the intelligent grid, as well as more energy efficient measures and renewable energy, our electric bills are flat or just a little bit higher than they were in 2013. And as you can see, the natural gas bills have actually fallen. Xcel Energy in Colorado, we're well over 30% below the national average when it comes to our bills. That, I hope, was not too much time. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate
Sure.
it. Questions? Neil?
Thank you, Craig. This was great. And if you already heard me ramble on about EVs, I also have solar panels. But my thing here is, you know, because you kind of had to rush through this, but, you know, one thing I know that everybody struggles with on the demand generation side is on our side, you know, in trying to help smooth the peaks in the summer. And I know you guys have a bunch of rebate programs out there with the home, the Saver Switch and other things like that. What can we do here to help drive the adoption? Because what we've heard is that Saver Switch, which really does help you guys manage the peaks in the summer, what can we do to help drive that adoption? Is it, you know, is it the awareness? Is it evangelizing it more? You know, what can we do to help, you know, get people aware of this? Because that'll really help. I mean, California's got rolling brownouts and stuff like that. We've never had to deal with that. But that is an easy way to help deal with your, you know, your demand side generation, which, you know, obviously you wouldn't want to do. But, you know, are there other things out there that we can grab onto to help kind of, you know, start reducing the envelope?
Great question. And I'm excited because I meant to say this at the very beginning. I'm very happy that we're now about to begin this new relationship over the next 2 years called Partners in Energy, shortened PI, we call it. And Superior was just approved as our latest participant. It's a neat example of how a utility and a community can work together to do exactly what you're saying. We're going to come in and with our consultants with the Brendel Group, we're going to spend a significant amount of time bringing in data that you don't currently have access to, benchmarking what you're currently doing in your city buildings as well as across the town of Superior in all of the buildings. And then we're going to come up with an energy plan that will be robust and aggressive and achieve goals that are important to you, not just to us. And then we're going to go after and implement those goals, those tactics, and achieve some really good things. So in a way, Trustee Shaw, it's let's try to maximize what we already provide our customers, what we already offer in the form of rebates. And in many cases, people just don't know. Right. So if we can co-market these things and work to infiltrate them into your businesses here, for example, with some very, very good programs that have been working throughout the state of Colorado, I think we have great opportunities.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, by the way, I was listening to what you were saying about the electric vehicle because I can't wait. I have 3 children who drive, so my head is always under a hood fixing something, and I can't wait to not have oil changes and tune-ups.
Yeah, no, I mean, the cost of operations are really low. The risk of giving an EV to my son or my daughter is the acceleration and their inability to manage that, you know, off a traffic light.
I hear you.
Craig, thanks for being here tonight. I'm just thrilled to hear that we're now in the Partners for Energy program. I hadn't heard that yet, that we'd been accepted and we were part of it, so that's excellent news. You heard our conversation, obviously, about electric vehicles. I was wondering if you might spend a little bit of time on your next slide as well, educating the board a bit further on what you can share for our future discussion that we'll now have at a later date, hopefully.
The company has been engaged in the discussion about electrification for well over 10 years in the state of Colorado. We've joined all of the associations. We were deeply engaged with the Ritter and the Hickenlooper administrations on making this easier. We've gone to the legislature and gotten certain laws passed to allow people to just plug in at these charging stations and not worry about where's the bill coming from, who's getting the money. All of that has been figured out. We've also had a recent law constructed to allow us to own the infrastructure that serves these stations. Up to just this past legislative session, we weren't allowed to own those things. So it took somebody else to invest. Now we're able to do that, and we think that there will be a much more proliferation opportunity of these charging stations. Although, you know, I heard what you guys were talking about is maybe people don't need them at Costco, they just go home and charge. But there are definitely some places around Denver where, you know, the new form of transportation is going to tend to have cars constantly rotating and picking people up. If you don't want to own a car, for example, in a higher density neighborhood, you can just step out and step into one of these cars, which will stay on the road and not park during the day all that much, or won't go back to a home. So it's going to need a place to charge quickly. You know, so we're trying to create the charging infrastructure. We've got the rates and the technology sort of figured out for now. And we're here to, in fact, we're doing a pilot project right now trying to evaluate what our communities really want as far as EVs and what you folks need, maybe fleet vehicles and that sort of thing. So we're willing to talk about all of that as part of the Partners in Energy program.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Craig. Anyone else?
I very much appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. All right, we're on to item number 3. I think that's the record longest for 2 items in my 5 years of being here. All right, we'll go with consent agenda items A, B1, D, E, and G. Have a motion to approve those items. Motion by Trustee Ryan, second by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis. All those in favor? All right, that passes unanimous. All right, now we'll go with consent agenda item B2. Sandy, that's Open Space Advisory Committee meeting notes.
Okay, I actually pulled this one because I had a question that had come out of the Open Space Advisory Committee. In the minutes, you will see that they had requested up to $10,000 for installation of the bird boxes, which is not a movie or anything like that. They're actually, and I was not sure what we could do about that. I know before Patrick Hammer had left, we had been talking about, we thought it would be about $5,000 to do it, and he literally thought there was money within the budget that he could do it, and we wouldn't have to come even to the board because he would be able to maneuver around the existing funds. However, one of the issues that came up from OSAC was that the poles that we wanted to put the bird boxes on, there might be a problem because they wouldn't be aesthetically pleasing to the community. And certainly that's something that was important to OSAC that we didn't want to, we know we want to do the bird boxes, but we had an issue with the poles, and that it could be up to $10,000. This funding would come out of the Open Space Fund, but it was not in the budget to spend the $10,000. We felt confident we could do the 5. Kendra's raised the issue that, you know, this might be tricky. This is part of the work plan because it's part of the, you know, opportunities for the community to engage with nature, and so it's within our work plan, but it is an issue of more money than we originally thought we were going to spend. We didn't know what we could do, whether we could do it, but we do need to move forward on some of the bird boxes because of the timing of when the birds actually start scoping out their nests and things. So we really need to do it within the next, I think it's 30 days. So Ryan stayed and could answer any questions. I literally don't know what we need to do, but I am hoping that we could get the okay to spend up to the $10,000 to get this done. That's kind of where we are. That's why I pulled it, because we don't know what we can do. Normally, we would just approve the minutes, but we didn't know what that meant.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why I asked to pull it.
All right, thanks, Sandy. Kendra or Matt, can you speak to, does this kind of work this similar way that CAPS did, that you
I
can
think so, yep.
administratively
Yep.
approve this if we give a head nod to do that? Okay. All right, I'll say I'm in favor of it.
I'm in favor.
Okay. Yes. Mark, Kevin?
Did we pursue, is there, I mean, I think it's great. Of course, I'm in favor of it, right? But is there other money, is there free money available? Like Alex is amazing at like finding money. You know, are there funding sources available through Boulder County, state of Colorado, or kind of other sources where a grant or something might be available? So we're not, I mean, it's cool and I'm glad, happy to spend 10 grand, but it just feels like maybe something else is available. I completely unrelated, but you know, the study we did for Northwest Sub Area Planning, right? I mean, it was a great necessary planning, and we heard tonight, oh, I would have paid for that. Like, okay, this is a good idea. Can somebody else pay for it?
We can definitely look into that, yeah. But I don't know.
So it just, right, it feels like maybe, so I'm supportive. I don't want to put a contingent upon, but maybe just, if we could just work the phones a little bit and see if maybe there's some funding through Boulder County or somebody wants to help a little bit. And if we can't find it, we can't find it. We'll spend it ourselves.
Yeah, the only question I have is, they need to move forward on this quickly. So if town staff can't find anybody in the next 27 days, I can't remember how fast it is, we have to get it out there. Do we hold up? They really want to move forward. I actually think the town is really going to enjoy this when we get it done. Brian?
Well, it's just a couple thoughts here. We could also scale it back. I mean, this was for 10 bird boxes, which, you know, maybe if we thought the number should be lower, maybe we scale it back this year, see how it goes, and add more. You know, I know that the budget process is going on now, and maybe we could do some now and then try to get the rest or put the rest into the budget process that's going on now. When we first talked about the budget, we had asked Patrick, you know, should this be feeding into the budget process? And he was kind of like, well, I think I can find the money. And so that's why it didn't go into that process. But we were open to that also. And yes, we'd like to do it now, but obviously we don't want to force this. And if we need to wait a year, we could still get some, but, you know, if it's possible, we do, like Sandy said, we do need to move fast.
So I'm supportive as well. I guess my thought would be, you know, there's a reference in the minutes here about saying some with webcams. Unless there's a reason not to have all with webcams. I mean, if we got Raptor Cam, I want Raptor Cam. That would be fun for the community to watch.
We can't put cameras on all of them. There's a limitation of where we can put them because you got to be able to get the wireless to them. And so there's no way we could even remotely put it on all of them. But I think there's two sites that we would actually have the cams on. I would love to do it too, but it's just physically not possible at this point.
Okay, well, then we do what we can. So,
Some birds might have privacy concerns too. Invading their
it's understandable.
You got to sign a EULA.
Okay.
What happens to the operating cost of these? You know, when we put the two with the webcams, you know, granted it's probably wired, but you know, if it goes down, who's on the hook to go get it to work
I mean, it would
again?
come out of, I think from what Patrick was saying, it would come out like other things that the open space fund pays for. This would pay for the maintenance.
Okay.
It wasn't going to be significant, but I don't remember the numbers. I mean, you're talking about power.
Yep.
It's fairly low power, but the data, right? You have to have a wireless, or maybe you have a wired connection in there, but if it's wireless, that could be more expensive.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And then, Kendra, unrelated to this subject, just on these, we're doing a nice job asking our committees to weigh in on applications. And then when I'm trying to read the meeting minutes and I see that they're commenting on applications, I get a little uncertain on what I should be doing. And as a rule, I just kind of stop reading. If you might want to provide staff maybe some guidance on, maybe we reserve inclusion of the meeting minutes on those applications, and then they're included with our packet when we, if and when we receive an application?
I think that's a good idea. We can talk about that.
Because it's happened twice,
Mhm.
right? Thanks.
Yep.
Good.
In the meantime, I just remind us to disclose as appropriate at the time.
Okay, we good on that item?
Thank
right.
you.
Let's move on to 3B2, I'm sorry, 3B3, Mark.
Yeah, so I
Transportation
pulled this
Safety
and
Committee.
we don't need to belabor this too much, but I'm glad that the Transportation Safety Committee minutes are being included now in our board packets. These minutes are from the meeting from August 5th. In the discussion about South Coal Creek Drive, the minutes reflect under agenda item 2A in the minutes, South Coal Creek Drive, number 1, 25-mile-per-hour speed limit is now posted. Number 2, concrete median island for pedestrian enhancement at the bus stop is completed except for signing. TSC requested monitoring the visibility and installing additional measures until the final signing can be installed. So we discussed this at the August 12th board meeting. At that point, the board didn't have the minutes from that meeting. It would have been helpful, I think, to have it at that meeting. But I want to emphasize the need for outreach and signing. There was an email that went amongst the board. Trustee Shaw let us all know that somebody drove over the refuge the day following the last meeting on the 12th. So on August 13th, somebody drove over the refuge because there wasn't any signage. And just in general, I'm disappointed in the way in which this improvement was made. I don't think that there was enough public outreach to let the community know that the left turn lane would be removed, and there wasn't enough public outreach and safety cones and signage to warn drivers that there was a large concrete obstruction in the middle of the road. So I think it was a noble cause, and I'm glad that the TSC was focused on increasing pedestrian safety, but I think that there were several missteps in terms of the manner in which this was communicated or wasn't communicated, and then in the ultimate execution. So I think we can do better, and I expect we will going forward.
So before we move on from that as well, and maybe this is just how the TSC has evolved over the past few years, but I recall when speed bumps were being discussed for Waldona, that came to the full board for approval, because I happened to be here at midnight and spoke about it when the board voted on it. Speed bumps aren't coming before the full board anymore, and there's been other changes that are very visible on the face of the community. I don't necessarily think the TSC has done anything wrong or is doing anything incorrectly, but I'm concerned that despite the efforts of the TSC and staff, people are still being caught off guard and surprised. And I think maybe at the next retreat, maybe we talk about this further, about what bubbles all the way up to the board for approval and or discussion, just to give it that one last final piece of visibility to the community, because I'm hearing more and more people being caught off guard by these decisions. And I know the surveys are going out, I'm seeing it in emails, but because it's not all coming up to the board, I can't say, yes, I approved it on this date. That was only a committee decision. People say, well, why does the committee make the decision? I don't have a good answer because I don't think we've actually talked about it. And I know things were different in the past. So something I'd like to discuss further at a future date.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to discuss. I mean, I think there's no bright line on what the threshold is, right? And so we don't want to waste somebody's time saying the TSC said, please repaint the crosswalks, right? I mean, that's a good idea, and of course everybody's going to do it. At the same time, we're trying at the end of the TSC make sure, okay, we're going to bring the following, 2 or 3 things to the board to make sure they're aware of it. And we have backed off on a couple of things saying this is, because if it's a material cost, yeah, let's make sure. But we own the temporary speed bumps, for example, we own temporary speed bumps. Right? I don't know, we got 3 of them. We're going to, every summer or spring, we're going to move them around. And
But we have permanent ones going in at Castle Peak.
Exactly.
Didn't come all the way. to the full board. So
Well-
a departure from what it was in the past.
Always, yeah, but we went temporary to permanent and discussed at the board level. So, but yeah, there is a threshold both for materiality as it impacts the community as well as fiscal materiality. And, you know, I'm fine talking about that at a retreat because we got to find the right line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I would second the request for it to just go on a retreat, and so we can determine kind of what the threshold for financial kind of discretion that the TSC has, and then I think just kind of generally speaking, I don't like being surprised, and you know, when residents are saying, "Oh, I can't believe this decision was made," I had to go back and look, when did we make this decision, and then find out, oh, we actually didn't make the decision because it was made at the TSC level, and that I just don't think that's a best practice. So I think some of it's going to be addressed now that we're getting the minutes in the board packet. So hopefully it's going to be just a process improvement made going forward. But, you know, if we didn't have the minutes, the only way we would know about it would be if the TSC members were actually reporting on the specific things during the board meetings, or if the board members went back and watched the meetings. And that's just not a good way to go about doing things.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on that? Okay. All right. Procedurally, we need to take a vote on 3B, 2 and 3, which is these two approval of these meeting notes. So do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
All right. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis, second by Trustee Hammerly. All those in favor? All right. That passes unanimous. Okay. We're on to 3C. Mark.
So I pulled this, you know, just kind of generally speaking, I don't like the idea of passing an ordinance without actually having a discussion on it. So I wanted everybody to understand in the community that what we are considering adopting here is an ordinance to comply with state law. And what this ordinance does is it basically changes the definition of what public consumption is in a manner that's consistent with state law that was enacted in this past year in the legislative session. So what this means is that you can smoke a joint on your front porch or in your backyard legally in the town of Superior after this ordinance gets passed.
That's correct.
We've got Troy's here and he's shaking his head, he's nodding his head, so.
I'll be honest, prior to this point, the state didn't really have a good definition of open and public consumption.
Right.
We had our own because there was a hole that we were filling. The state filled it, and because of that, we need to be compliant with the state.
So walking down the sidewalk still illegal.
Correct.
You're on your own private property. You can
That
smoke
is-
a joint on your porch.
That's correct.
You can also drink a glass of alcohol.
Yep.
Right.
It's exactly the same.
Now, in the event that this is causing a nuisance for a neighbor and they're complaining about the odors, is this, are they out of luck?
Yes. I mean, we don't have an odor ordinance, and based on Erie's experience with that, I'm not sure I would recommend that you adopt one either, but yeah, you're out of luck.
And even if we weren't to pass this ordinance, we're a statutory municipality and this is governed by state law already.
Correct.
Okay. Any further?
Those are
discussion?
my questions and points.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
So I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
To approve Town of Superior Ordinance number O-9, Series 2019, an ordinance to the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior amending Section 10-8-50 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding the definition of open and public consumption of marijuana.
All right. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis, second by Trustee Ryan. All those in favor? All right. That passes unanimous. All right. We're on to 3F, adoption of a resolution approving an over-the-air reception device agreement with CenturyLink. Ken, you pull this?
Yep. So I do have specific questions, but just general to start. Kendra, as the staff memo stated, local jurisdictions have limited ability to regulate wireless facilities on private property. We already had experiences similar to this when we were discussing other facilities in town. Can you give a brief description of what the town can and cannot regulate in this regard?
Sure. And I know, just to point out representatives of CenturyLink are here too to answer any questions you may have about the actual technology. So basically, if a facility meets certain requirements under the federal act, then we have very limited authority to regulate it at all. It just has to be basically safe. So it prohibits zoning them out, anything like that. So really, as long as they are 1 meter or less in diameter and designed to receive direct broadcast satellite service, they're exempt from most of our regulations. So we can, again, make sure that they're safe, and that's about it. So just to be blunt about it. So that's what we've done here, and I know that CenturyLink has basically voluntarily agreed to this agreement so that we can keep track of these things and make sure that they're safe and that we know where they are. Other than that, we don't have a lot of authority over these.
Is it always required that a homeowner's approval must come first? To be able to put it on somebody's home?
Oh, sure,
Which
they
the
can't just
agreement
go,
includes.
they
Right.
can't just go in and put them on your home without your
Just-
approval. This is if
just
you
making
want it
sure.
on your own house.
Right.
Yes, yes.
So, and this may be a question for you all, and maybe Kendra's question for you, but, so looking at the actual agreement, I noticed a single reference to HOAs. I'll read it. It's in section 2, subsection B. CenturyLink further acknowledges and agrees that the installation of any facilities or receiving facility on private property shall require the approval and consent of the owner of any proposed facility or receiving facility location in compliance with any local, state, or federal laws with regard to use of private property, including compliance with the requisite provisions of any homeowners association agreements or requirements. So that's the only point in which homeowners associations are referenced. I believe in the entire town of Superior, we have both Original Town and Sagamore that are the only non-HOA neighborhoods. So this is a significant point within town. Who is ultimately responsible for getting the HOA approval for anything that goes on the structure? I assume it's still the resident, but
It's the resident and the company, whoever that may be, but yes.
Right.
We have no control over that.
right.
Trustee Lish, I'm Carrick in Abnett with CenturyLink, and I am in the legal and governmental area and have been for many, many years now. And I've got with me the head of our wireless engineering, Mike Elford, to help answer any questions. And I think in that instance, it would be a combination of the resident wanting the service and then actually the going through the HOA and determining the rules that applied. And I might mention too, in this case right now, we are strictly at a trial level, and this agreement's only for 6 months and then with 1 6-month renewal. So we can always come back and talk further with the town attorney at such time as we may go forward into full scale trying to offer this service. At this point, really, we have our initial placement that we wish to do, which is on an employee's house, Andrew Dugan, who lives in the town, and then from there, it would probably be a few homes, possibly of other employees, that we would put the antennas on as well. So, but in the case of Mr. Dugan, he does not have an HOA over his street. So.
Okay. So my understanding of the technology is that you would install this one and then others, and I forget the specific language, can then feed off of that one up to, I think it said 20 homes. Is that?
It's actually 32 homes.
32 homes.
And then there are ways actually to take one of those receiving homes and branch it off even to get further maximization of the signal. And I do have some pictures. If it's okay to approach, I'll be happy to share these with the group. First off, this is the actual anchor node that would go on satellite structure is actually the one that would send the signal out, while the darker node above it is the one that is receiving. And to give you an idea further, just for an idea of kind of size of these, we got some pictures.
Okay, if we can just pass
Yeah.
those down and make it easy.
Okay. Of the dark node you see on.
Do you mind going back to the mic just so we can capture all this on the, you mind going back to the podium? Thanks. That way we can just pick up everything you're saying.
Yes, Mayor. So as
Thank
you
you.
requested, my apologies on that. The first picture gives you an idea of the circular dish, which actually transmits the signal out, and the above it, the darker node, which actually receives the signal. And then the second picture is actually a picture of that darker node set next to a Coke can, so you get an idea of its size, and also just sit next to some very regular satellite dishes as well. So, and Mr. Alford, I don't know, he seemed like he was sort of pacing back here, so wanted to make sure he didn't have any clarifications. Okay, so despite my legal training, I've managed to still stay within the engineering parameters thus far, so.
I appreciate it, and I think you answered my questions well.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I just have a couple questions.
Yes.
Where is this residence located?
This is on Wiley Street, 902 Wiley, and
Okay.
It's
So
in
this
the
is gonna-
Waterford subdivision, yeah.
Okay. And this is going to be a 5G technology?
yes, this will be a 5G technology.
Is there any sort of notice that's going out to the neighbors that are living around this residence of the installation of this device?
I don't believe there's any notice, and I think that probably goes back to the OTARD rules, but
Exactly.
this literally is on a mount that goes behind the chimney, and it's a line of sight back to our office over in Broomfield, and so it is very unobtrusive.
Basically, we have to treat them like these DirecTV dishes that are on here, so no notice.
Okay.
You made reference earlier to there not being an HOA, or this location not being in an HOA, which.
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
But there is.
There is.
There is in that
Okay.
location.
And I think this is one of my concerns. So in Exhibit A, we have a project of the actual agreement. We have the project description and location area. It's number 2 within Exhibit A. And the final line is that this is subject to any requisite approvals from private landowners. I'd feel a whole lot more comfortable if that also included reference to homeowners associations. That's not something we can do.
We can't do that. No.
My concern is that we're setting up residents to be in conflict with their homeowners associations, because this isn't necessarily something that comes
The
up.
HOA can't do anything more than what we can do. That's what I'm saying. So the HOA is restricted exactly the same way that we are. So the OTARD basically says these things have to be allowed, and the HOA can't prohibit them, and neither can we. So there's, I mean, we're all under the same restriction.
Okay.
Okay, just, I know the answer to this, but for the purpose of clarification, so these transmitting and receiving devices that are on the chimney, our homes are all pretty close to each other here in this community, right? They could be literally, so long as it's on somebody else's private property, they could be transmitting feet away from somebody's bedroom.
That's, we were at this site in this particular case anyway. I don't think it would be that close, but if your question is concerning some kind of safety concern, then I would let Mr. Alford.
So I
speak to
know,
that.
so we've been through this, and so I know you're, I'm gonna look like the tinfoil hat wearing person by asking about my safety concerns. I recognize that through OTARD in the state of Colorado, you've removed our ability to do our job, to legislate, to potentially protect our citizens, even if there is no danger. I will not be approving this. I recognize that I'm putting my colleagues and our attorney and our staff in a bad situation in the unlikely event this is not approved, but as much as I like CenturyLink as an organization, the inability for us to do our job is just not okay with me. So I'm not going to approve this. And I'm not an expert on the science, and I recognize that, you know, a lot of the concerns were, you know, the best article that was out there was the one from the New York Times this summer, kind of debunking some of the myths that were out there. And I found that helpful, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with that article. But I just do not think it's appropriate to hang a 5G receiver and transmitter what might be feet away from somebody else's bedroom window. So I think this needs a more thoughtful approach and maybe a different community. But we don't have the ability to legislate, so one day Kendra might twist my arm and I may have to approve it, but for tonight I will not be.
Okay. You know, thank you very much for those comments. I am Mike Elford, Wireless Strategy and Development for CenturyLink. You know, we talked a moment ago, you know, to your point about 5G, and the particular technology here, 802.11ad, which is the next evolution of technology related to Wi-Fi. So today in your home, more than likely in this room, there's a Wi-Fi access point. So contained within the device that goes on the roof, the FCC defined safe zone is within that device. It is as safe as the Wi-Fi devices you use today. Yes, it is the next generation of technology. Today, you can go and buy a Netgear Nighthawk X10, put it in your home, and it's designed specifically to put into the consumer space so that you can have multi-gigabit of connectivity in your home. So, you know, certainly we appreciate your position. I wanted to specifically share that this is the next evolution specifically of Wi-Fi for the type of technology. And more than likely within the next 2 to 3 years, you'll have this technology not going from rooftop to rooftop, but on your countertop, talking directly to your TV and data connections within your home. That ecosystem certainly already it does exist and is available to consumers today. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Just a technical question. I mean, what frequency ranges are we talking about for the transmit, you know, for the line of sight to the Broomfield office and then internally?
That's E-band, 80 and 90 gigahertz.
For both?
Yeah, well, the point-to-point connection.
Point-to-point, and then for the, I think,
that the mesh,
yeah.
WiGig 802.11ad is 60 gigahertz.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move to approve Town Superior Resolution Number R-48, Series 2019, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town Superior approving an over-the-air reception device agreement with CenturyLink LLC.
Okay, motion by trustee Lish.
Can we have discussion?
Let's get a second and then
I'll
we'll have
second.
discussion. All right, second by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis, discussion.
I appreciate your comments, Kevin, and I don't want to dismiss any of the concerns that the public has about 5G technology. There's definitely there are concerns about it. You don't know what you don't know, and people are scared of the unknown, and there are a lot of things on the internet that you can read that you can go into a spiral of of concern, and everybody's going to be convinced that we're all going to have cancer, and who knows what's going to happen. While I appreciate Kevin's principled objection to not liking the lack of discretion that we have, and the fact that the laws have been drafted in a way that have taken our ability to make these judgment calls, which we should have, away from us. At the end of the day, I think we still have an obligation to follow the law as it is written, and I don't think we have a legitimate basis to not approve an ordinance or a resolution here approving this agreement because of the way the FCC rules have been promulgated. So I think we're kind of stuck, and under those circumstances, I don't think it's worth voting against a resolution that I don't think we have the discretion to vote against.
Right. So I agree with you, right? I mean, I agree with everything you say, and I appreciate that. I know I'm putting everybody in a possible situation. We're talking about the same neighborhood where there's just been a tremendous amount of feedback around changing the character of the neighborhood through roads and trails and protection of the tract age. I'll be careful with that phrase, tract age. And what's in their sight line, and whether or not construction trailers and sales trailers are permitted. Yet here, putting kind of next generation technology feet away from a neighbor's bedroom, and that neighbor has not been notified. I just don't think it's appropriate to do so, and if we reject it, then CenturyLink might come back to us and say, you can't reject us again, and we might see some legal letters, and we might get some legal letters from Kendra, but we also might see the residents say, I don't want to be disruptive to my community, please don't hang this on my house. And if your resident employee says, please don't hang this on my house, then CenturyLink will pull the application. So let's see what happens. Let's say no. Let's do our jobs and legislate, even though we're told we can't. I think we have a way to do this. I think we could say no. When we say no, CenturyLink will come back to us. We'll get legal letters. That resident will be known in the public, and I think he or she may likely request that this device not be hung on their house, which I just don't think is, a good idea. Maybe it is a good idea.
If I can just be completely honest, they can do it without this agreement. So
I
even
know,
if you say no, the same thing may happen. You
Yep,
just won't
and
have any knowledge of it or any control over it.
Mm-hmm.
And therein lies my concern. That sets a worse precedent. So at least now we know.
That's why we brought this to you in the first place, because we wanted you all to know where they are, what they're doing, when they're going up, but it's not required.
Yeah. As a general rule, I have a hard time, A, going against a law when we know there's one on the books in making our decisions, and B, actually making a decision that will leave our community worse off. And while I understand, Kevin, your points, and if CenturyLink truly needed our approval, I would say they are valid, but my greatest concern is this just goes up anyway, and then on the next one and the next one, we don't even know about it, and neither does anybody else. And meanwhile here, there's public documents, this is done in a public setting, everybody knows, and it can get back to the neighbors, and there can be further discussion. I think if we don't approve this, it ultimately sets us in the direction you are trying to keep us from going down.
I agree with those points, Ken, and I would also like to add that I do appreciate CenturyLink coming forward, being candid about this, answering the questions that we're asking, recognizing that we're not, subject matter experts in this technology, also disclosing the location of where it's going to be installed, and just coming in here and, partnering, with us and being transparent about the request. So, that to me is, the type of relationship that we as a town want to foster with all, corporations that are coming and doing anything in our town. We'd rather be upfront about those discussions and have them in an open manner so the public can get informed. I think it's also important for, while I like civil disobedience and and it has a time and place, I think it's important for the town to act responsibly as much as we can be, and I think it's also important for us to be predictable. And I don't want the town to have a reputation of being fickle and unpredictable. And if somebody comes forward with a request that otherwise should be approved, and then we just vote against it, out of spite. I'm not saying that that's what we're doing here, but I wouldn't want that to be the reputation that the town of Superior has, that we're, in some manner difficult to do business with or unreasonable in terms of the positions that we're taking.
There are communities, and I don't have the list, but there are communities all over America that are raising their hand and saying, wait a minute, let's take a breath and recognize that the law is against them, and those communities may not be able to legislate the way I think we should, which is let's force this into a type of approval. But there are communities that are standing up to telecommunication companies saying, this is what we're going to do, and standing up to their state elected officials and U.S. officials to say there are things that should be left to individual communities. So I do think we have an opportunity, and I'm not suggesting that by doing so we're not being neighborly to CenturyLink. They've been nice neighbors, or we are providing any type of competitive disadvantage to somebody from a technology perspective, may desire some 5G technology. I'm just suggesting that this came on us. I don't think that the neighbors have been properly notified, and I think it's appropriate. And anyway, so you guys know where I am. So I suspect I know where this is going to go, which is fine. But for me, the same reason and some of you recall, I did the same thing when we voted on the Verizon, right? So I just don't like hanging technology outside somebody's bedroom window without knocking on their door saying, hey, I'm going to be emitting some stuff through your bedroom, man. So just thought you should be aware of it and have the approval to say yay or nay. It's just not something that I'm comfortable with. And the science, I've not invested enough time on the science, and I'm not going to quote the ridiculous internet articles. I'll quote the gray lady and say it was largely debunked, right? It is likely completely safe technology. Very, very likely. There's no evidence that it's dangerous. For stating my interpretation of the article from the Times.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to add 2 cents to this. I went back and looked at my notes from Verizon and the MLA because I shared a lot of the same concerns that Ken and Kevin both raised. And ultimately, I kind of use this agreement as a way to kind of protect us, the town. At least we'll have a documentation of where it's at. And I do rely on the community to, flag what they see to be an ugly obstruction on a home, post it on social media. It's surprising how towns, or rather, large companies react to social media because it affects their brand. And if you take the early generation of dish antennas, they were horrific. They were large, and towns had no input on what they look like, but they shrank. Dish, EchoStar, all these guys shrank their footprints, made them color matched, and so on and so forth. And if this thing looks atrocious, I want that community to stand up and say it looks atrocious. And I think that is really, they have more power in this than we do. However, this agreement, I think, will at least allow us to document where this stuff is and keep record of it. It's disappointing, but I think it's the best we got.
And to Trustee Ryan's point, I think you mentioned standing up to state representatives and getting them on the side. I'd like to point out again, just as a reminder, Mayor Pro Tem Lasis, as the town's member on the CML Policy Committee, sent out an email that we could propose changes to state law to the CML to be lobbied on by half their lobbyists and the proposal would be due September 11th. I think if this is something you're passionate about, let's talk further and bring it forth to see if there's something we can present to the CML and get buy-in. I don't want to minimize your concerns. I think they're all valid, and I think this is just something that needs to happen at a higher level than where we are.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I'd be happy to present anything to the CML. I guess, my general concern is just, it's really a question of like, whose fight is this to have? And if there are certain things that are, preempted by federal law or state law, it's one thing to take a principled stand against something. It's another thing to take a practical stand that would actually do something to effectuate change. And, it's one thing to not like the fact that we don't have a say in the matter. It's another thing to actually do something that, potentially could actually change that in a manner where you would have a say. And I don't think that, voting against this is necessarily, the hill to die on that fight. I think lobbying your state representatives and your congressional delegation and your U.S. senators, I mean, that's who we should be talking to if we have a problem with the fact that federal law is preempting us on this issue.
I agree with everything you guys are saying. I recognize that this may not be the hill for us as a community, as a board to die on, but for me personally, I'm not gonna, who knew, right, before we came up here, who knew that there would be telecommunication companies that have effectively lobbied to prohibit us from doing our job, that oil and gas would effectively lobby from prohibiting us to do our job. I had no idea. I thought I'd be able to do up here, and, when I met with Kendra and Matt, they, sort of gave me an attaboy and said, now you have the ability to legislate. So here's something that I just can't do. And it's just surprising to me. And so it's not the hill for us as a town or maybe as a community or you as a board to die on. But for me, thanks, but no thank you. And I just, I'm not going to do it.
Okay, any further discussion?
Kendra, are there any restrictions when we sign agreements like this that the town would then distribute them to the immediate neighbors?
No, of course, we could if we want to.
I mean, to me, if nothing else, at least we're giving some notice to the residents. We obviously don't have a policy about it, but even if we could draft some sort of a memo or we send it to the HOA, it just feels like, most people probably didn't even pay any attention to this. It was on the consent agenda. So if there's a way that we could inform neighbors and just say, hey, this is occurring in your neighborhood, and we wanted to make you aware. I mean, I don't know whether we send the agreement or we just send them a quick synopsis of what it means.
It's up to you, but yeah, there's nothing prohibiting us from doing that.
Okay. I mean, I would like to see
we couldn't
us
make
do
it a
that.
requirement, but we can do it on our own.
Yeah, and we full disclosure to you guys that we're going to do it, just so the neighbors know what's coming their way. There's nothing they can do about it either, but from a disclosure standpoint, I'd like to have them know that this is happening.
And that would be good if you would, if we could have the same sort of openness, and if the town attorney could let us know something like that was going out, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you could draft something up and then have them look at it, but I'd just like to make sure that the neighbors in that community are made aware.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Lish, Folsom, Lasis, Shaw, Hammerly, opposed? Ryan, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board, and Trustee Ryan. Certainly do respect your
Thank you for coming and thanks for being
comments.
good neighbors up the hill.
So, yes, sir.
Thanks for sticking around at 10:30 at night.
Yes. All right, item number 4 is legislative update.
So, town manager and I just talked. I think we should postpone this. We're not going to get through enough of this to make any difference, really. None of this is pressing, other than the ordinance you just passed. For example, marijuana delivery couldn't even possibly start until January 1st of 2020, and that's only for for medical. So my suggestion is that we postpone this to a time when we have more time to devote to it, and we go on to the
Because we've got
executive
that whole list of.
Right.
Where you wrote the summary memo, we've got that
Right.
whole list to kind of go through, and yeah, that could take,
This could literally
An hour
take
or
2
two.
hours, so, you know.
Well done, by the way. Good memo.
Oh, good, thanks. Yeah, so my suggestion is nothing is urgent other than the one that we just did. The e-scooters is the other one that basically takes effect immediately, but I've already talked to the sheriff's office, sheriff's department, and they're not enforcing that right now anyway, so we're not in trouble there, so. We don't have a lot of e-scooters here now anyway, and so I'm not too worried about it.
okay.
Just
All right.
thinking about our schedule for the next 3 months, though, I'm a little concerned that we're going to find 2 hours to do this.
We're gonna have to.
Well, during the retreat, I think it might be a good opportunity to talk about it.
I mean, I'm all for having a conversation as soon as possible, just thinking realistically about the number of FDPs that I keep hearing about. We're going to run out of daylight. So.
Okay.
Is there any other concern from the board? I know Mayor Pro Tem Lasis did some outreach to the community, and I think there might be an expectation for an answer from the board in regard to marijuana delivery.
Yeah. Yes, I put a poll out.
I understood that you were gonna do that.
Yeah, and I just said, what do people think? And I gave them a little, by means of background, 2013, the town enacted a ban on dispensaries in the town. Now, in response to state law, we would be considering potentially allowing delivery to the town from centers outside of the town, and just polled the Facebook group. Last I checked, it was 97 in favor, 83 opposed. So that's like a 55 to 45% split. So yeah, I mean, I'm fine letting the community know. I've got, my position made on that personally. But if we want to table all this to the future, that's fine too.
Is there a desire to go through some of them and check some off the list and do the rest later?
My preference would be to take this one, because it was the only one that I think the residents are fully aware of, and discuss it, and then table the rest.
I'd be fine with that.
Or alternatively, Mayor Pro Tem Lasis just let everybody know on that Facebook poll that we're postponing it. That way we're at least managing community expectations.
I'm fine either way.
Just depends how late we want to be.
Yeah, just to be clear, no delivery can possibly happen until January 1st of 2012 and 20, and then that would only be medical.
Medicinal, and then 2021 would be for rec.
Exactly.
So would that be 2 separate ordinances, medicinal allowed?
You can do 2 separate. I know some communities are considering delivery only for medical and not for recreational. Some are just putting it off and only dealing with medical now because that's the only one that they have to deal with, and then they'll deal with recreational later.
So I just had one question on, I don't know, are we having this discussion now?
I think we are.
Okay. In terms of sales, so I understand we don't have any sales in town for
Correct.
the actual dispensaries. But if somebody orders it at their house, are the sales tax proceeds remitted to the town?
They should be, but we're state collected.
Not home rule.
We're not home rule. We don't collect our own tax. And the chances of this, I just don't know the chances of this actually being reported and collected.
Okay. But in theory, you order from one of the dispensaries in
Yes.
Louisville, and then somebody delivers it to your house, you pay sales tax, not to Louisville, but to Superior.
Right, that's the Wayfair case that came out of the U.S. Supreme Court 2 years ago that says that all of those deliveries are taxable in the location in which they're delivered.
So my general feel on this is that we should allow deliveries of both medicinal and recreational here in Superior, especially now that there's a potential net gain here from sales taxes. I don't think that there's really any reason to treat this differently from alcohol. Alcohol can be delivered to the home. People are already possessing this in the home. Now they can smoke it on their front porch or in their backyard. I think we're deluding ourselves into thinking that something is really going to change. This isn't revisiting whether or not we're actually going to have dispensaries, although I wanted to have that discussion as well. And that's one of the reasons why I asked the question to Brixmor during the work session today. I thought it was interesting what their answer was, which kind of may foreclose the idea in any event, just based on like locations to school. And there's not
a
too
convenient answer.
There's not too many places where we could actually put those locations here in town. But I would be supportive of allowing the delivery.
We
here in
did,
town.
I think we did a really poor job of noticing this, right? This is noticed as a legislative update, discussion with the town attorney, which is not necessarily making a decision. Discussion with the town attorney regarding legislation passed during the year that may impact the town.
And you wouldn't
To be
make
clear,
any
we're not
decision
making a
until
decision.
you adopt
She
an
needs to
ordinance.
draft an ordinance,
I
and
need
then
to
we
just
would
draft
vote on
it.
it. So this would get noticed, the actual ordinance adoption.
I understand. It just feels like starting to have this conversation, and while I really appreciate the fact, I didn't take the poll, but I like the fact that you did it, right? And yes, we could hang our hat on there's some financial benefit to the town because we will get some net tax receipts, but there is some healthy skepticism over whether or not we're really going to get those tax receipts, right? Because you're talking about a small business, a likely small business, because there aren't any, well, I don't know, I don't want to be an expert, pretend I'm an expert because I know nothing about this, but a likely small business delivering something that as if somebody submits, I don't know, $50 or $100 worth of weed to somebody's house, we're talking about a few percent. It doesn't feel like it's going to be a material financial impact. So A, I'm skeptical about our ability to get the revenue. B, I'm skeptical about the fact that there's any materiality associated with that revenue. So the question for me isn't around the revenue side. Is this kind of the right thing to do or not from the community? In 2013, and I was active watching the board, but I don't even remember the decision. The board made the decision to prohibit dispensaries.
Right.
I think if we're going to revisit that, it feels like we should revisit that and notice it appropriately and have that conversation and allow the community to weigh in. But we got a lot going on, and not once have I personally I've seen some Facebook comments, but prior to the Facebook comments, have not had anybody proactively come to me and say, hey, why can't we have a dispensary in town? That's really what we need, and it would be great for the town and great for the community. I have heard the opposite when people say they appreciate the fact that there aren't dispensaries, because when there are dispensaries, I have avoided a particular restaurant that I used to go to with my kids that I don't go to anymore in another town because it is next to a dispensary. And at the time, I just didn't want to explain to my kids kind of what was going on. So I suspect other members of the community have made a similar decision. I think it'll be a healthy conversation. I personally want to hear from the community. It sounds like you've sort of made up your mind on this. I haven't really made up my mind. But my instincts tell me, which are obviously subject to change, I want to hear what everybody else's thoughts are, that we shouldn't reopen the conversation for whether or not a dispensary should be in town or not. And we're talking about a medical use. I think if somebody if somebody wants to have home delivery for medical, I'm not opposed to that. For recreational, it feels like this is a 2021 thing. We could either kick the can down the road and not make the decision right now because I'm not sure why it's a priority, or continue to prohibit it. And if there's an outpouring of concern at some point in the future, then we could of course revisit it. But I'm not sure why we prioritize it at this point. I'm thankful that at the state level, we were allowed to do our job, to legislate, right? And I'm prepared to do so, which is, let's stay the course with where we are.
Well, I mean, I just for clarification, I'm not making any decision. I'm not making up my mind. Right here, we're responding to council's list of, these are things that need to get addressed because of changes at the State House. And, this is one of them. And we need to give her direction to draft an ordinance, either yay or nay, and then we would need to vote on it. So, there's still going to be further opportunities for, you know, substantial discussion on these questions, regardless of which way we end up voting. But she needs to have direction so she can prepare an ordinance, which then will be noticed. It won't be on a consent agenda. It'll be on,
Right.
you know, a regular meeting agenda for us to discuss in 2020 at some point, potentially.
The first, yeah, we should definitely adopt an ordinance on medical before the end of this year, so that we know before the first of next year what's going on.
Right.
The recreational, we can leave until next year sometime.
Right. And then, you
And
know,
the people do find those have different policy reasons. I'm just throwing it out there. So it is, a lot of communities are splitting those up. So
Right.
it's not unusual to split them.
So, you know, I'm not suggesting that we should reconsider the 2013 ban that was imposed by the board.
But it is kind of what you said.
Well, no, I didn't say we should reconsider. I'm asking the question, should we reconsider? I'm not saying we should reconsider it, but I'm just opening up the question here because this is now coming before us. And I actually have heard from residents who have said,
Yeah.
this is really, you know, it's some, if you're trying to discourage people from, you know, buying marijuana, you can go across 36 to Louisville and get it very easily. And you know, it's not discouraging use, and you're leaving money on the table in terms of sales tax, you know, remittances, you know, potentially dealing with vacancies. So it's, you know, I think it's worth a discussion. And frankly, I think when the board voted on it in 2013, you know, we didn't know what the future was going to hold, right? And I think we're voting from a point of a lack of information, maybe some fear in terms of this was actually going to bring, what it was going to look like. And I think, you know, we've had some experience now in a state now that has coexisted with legal marijuana, both on the medical and the recreational side. And we have just additional data now that might merit reconsidering that discussion. I'm not saying we should, but I'm just saying it might, right? Because circumstances have changed.
So I'll take that step then and say we should. I'd like us to have that discussion. This is not 2013. Things have changed. As you said, the industry has matured and we're at a different place now. And I mean, we are talking about economic development. That's been one of the key priorities for this year. And we're talking about banning an entire industry from Superior. And yeah, there's questions of whether or not we actually have a place for them. That's something that the developers need to figure out, because they're the ones that would know whether that works for them. But I'm comfortable saying that I'd like to have that conversation and have us revisit it. I don't know what the appropriate venue is, because I don't think we should immediately draft an ordinance that repeals that 2013 ban. I think it's something we should have a discussion. I would be a little bit concerned just having it in a retreat, because retreats are less visible than a regular meeting, but I'd like to go down that route. As of what we need to discuss today and find out what our board position is, I have no concerns with allowing delivery. There's a delivery of alcohol. There's the fact that we are continuing to treat these substances so differently is a bit of a contradiction in my opinion. And I have problems with contradictions, which is why I'm asking that we also discuss the ban on dispensaries. If we're allowed delivery, I think we should have that discussion of allowing dispensaries. But right now I land on the side of having our town staff draft an ordinance that permits both medical and recreational delivery.
Yeah, so, you know, I came in here ready to just discuss, you know, what's on the legal memo, and, you know, I'm all for medical delivery and ultimately retail delivery. I've heard from enough people in town that are scratching their head on why we enacted the ban so quickly before the state even put a single rule in place. You know, other states looked at Colorado after we spent 2 years developing rules, and they adopted them, and they went straight to delivery. California's got delivery from day one. I think our state legislature has done, a fantastic job of phasing things in over time, allowing the regulations to develop as they need to, and allowing local jurisdictions to set up the rules and safeguards that they want. You know, the town of Erie passed a ban in 2013, just like we did, but they put a 6-month moratorium on it. And they revisited it 6 months later, and then they passed it again. Then they actually went out to the town in 2015 and said, do you guys want a dispensary? They actually did a full sample data analysis, and 50% said no. So they actually made a good decision based on what their community felt. I went back and I watched the 2013 board meeting. There was no public comment. I went back and looked at the 2009 board meeting where we sort of just poo-pooed medicinal marijuana. It was actually troubling because I know a number of doctors that would not take that same position when it comes to medicinal marijuana. But ultimately, I think our residents should get to decide whether or not they want to have medicinal or retail delivered to their home. I'm all for it. I'd love to engage on reopening the recreational discussion, but as part of that, I'd love to do what Erie did and actually sample our community with what they feel about or how they feel about opening a retail or medical dispensary in town. But given the opening that we have from the legislature, I'd love to move forward with the medicinal delivery this year and then recreational at the same time.
Okay. Sandy?
I kind of hate that we're even having the discussion tonight without the public. And so I would prefer that we not have this, I agree with Kevin. I'm not thrilled with the way this was notified on the agenda. If we're going to talk about marijuana, it can be a hot topic in town. And so I would really prefer that we not have any more discussion on this until we can actually engage the public.
But that will happen if and when there's a draft ordinance, whether pro or against, right?
I'm not necessarily.
Well, we need to vote. We need to vote on an ordinance to ban it or to allow it.
And I can prepare both. I mean, honestly, if you want me to bring you both and you all can have that discussion, that's fine too. I need to prepare something because before the end of this year, we at least need to decide on medical. That's it. But I'm happy to prepare one yes and one no.
And I just don't think we should we just have so much on our plate in September and in November. And knowing how things go, some of that's going to bleed into October and December. So we need to give Kendra direction, at least on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the medical, that's fine. But what I just heard from 2 or 3 folks was that we should now revisit the conversation from 2003 around in-store dispensaries. And to, the same point, man, we've got a lot on our plate. So now we're just adding something else back on the plate. And if that's what you guys are hearing, maybe you guys hang out with more fun people than I hang out with. If that's what you guys are hearing, that's cool. Then maybe we should. I just don't hear it. And, the priority, I look at the board goals. I think about the applications. I think we solve the problem we have to solve for Kendra. And if we,
all right. So my comment is I support you bringing forward an ordinance to allow medical delivery. I think it makes sense to split them up and deal with medical first. I'm not interested in spending time on revisiting the dispensary ban, medical or recreational for Superior. Like Kevin, I've not heard hardly any desire for that. I don't think it's. I don't think it would be a significant revenue, effect for the town, and I think we'd spend a lot of time when we've got a lot of other things that need our time. So but if the board's desire is to open up that discussion later, let's do that later. But for now, let's get this ordinance in before the end of the year and have further discussion when the ordinance comes in.
And point of clarification, what about the delivery of non-medicinal?
That is not critical for 2020. That's something we can deal with during 2020 for 21.
That's correct.
Okay.
So my preference when this comes back forward is Kendra has 3 items drafted. One is a ban. One only includes delivery of medicinal, and one includes both. This will be fully publicized and noticed. We will hear from the community. Frankly, we're talking about being productive and what's efficient and effective. Why talk about this twice if we end up hearing from the community that they want delivery of both medicinal and recreational? So let's be prepared to actually act on what we hear from the community when this is properly noticed, which is the concerns I'm hearing. So let's just set ourselves up to not have to kick the can down the road again.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'd rather do things in one meeting than two, so.
It's 15 months, that's not kidding. I mean, we're talking, it's 15 months. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about, I think that, I mean, just to keep things simple, this idea of three things coming back does not make it easier to understand. I think you bring back an ordinance that allows medical and recreational, and if it's voted down, then we go a different direction. If it's approved, it's approved. I think that's.
Well, we could just have an, I mean.
Or change it as we.
Because,
change it as,
you know, so,
we're in the meeting.
You know, to your point, Kevin, you know, 15 months, we have limited attention that we can kind of naturally expect our residents to give to any particular issues that are coming before the board. And if just the question of not opening, you know, dispensaries or anything like that, but just should the town allow delivery of marijuana, like yes or no? And if so, should it be medicinal only, or should it be medicinal and recreational? Or should the town ban it? You know, I think we can just kind of agenda it like that. Then everybody is on notice of this topic who is, you know, interested and passionate about the issue, and they want to come and speak at public comment, rather than requiring them to, you know, follow our agendas and make sure that, oh, well, I knew about the recreational discussion, but not the medicinal discussion.
I'll just do all three.
Right. The good news about this board is we're highly functional, engaged, intelligent. It's the good news. The bad news is we talk to death, and I'm the guiltiest party, right? So this will be a 5-minute or less conversation if it's medicinal, and we can predict which way it's going. If you introduce recreational, it's not a 5-minute conversation. And we got a lot to do.
Okay, so bring all three. We'll have the discussion and go from there. Okay, anything further on the other items? That I think we're
going to table the rest.
Table the rest.
Really just rather we table the rest at
All
this
right.
point.
Let's table the rest. We got through one.
Although when we talk about e-scooters, we should talk about golf carts.
He's not wrong.
I like both of them. Okay. All right, tabling the rest of them. All right. Before we go into executive, or before we make a motion for executive session, which is our next agenda item, could we take a 5-minute recess? Okay, 5-minute recess. Okay, we're back. Item number 5 is executive session to hold conference with town attorney to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 246402-4B, and to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and or instruct negotiators pursuant to CRS 246402-4E regarding CenturyLink property.
I'll make a motion.
Right, motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis. Second by Trustee Ryan. All those in favor? All right, passes unanimous.